Chapter 11. The Salvatore Library is filled with students writing letters to those who has died, left and no longer with of the students find no reasons to celebrate Remembrance Day well not some mainly hope. She stands and watches the students write letters to their loved ones. She never found out why it was necessary because to her it was pointless, the dead wouldn't be able to see it. She was staring at a picture of the latest monster they needed to deal with. Nothing was heard or seen after Gisette was brought back from the dead. Perhaps it was a witch, but from the books Alaric had her go through she found a page about a necromancer. Apparently they had the ability to commune and bring back the dead. Under there wasn't able to talk to Naruto much since they've been busy with trying to find out information, but it looked like he was giving her space for what she didn't know, but today, she needed answers. She walked out the library and was about to head to the lake when she saw Raphael heading to the front. Was curious as to why he would be leaving the school grounds or whether he even had permission to go. She heard him say Cassie, and that was his girlfriend's name who died. No doubt she was sure the necromancer was bringing the dead back to life. She headed to the lake to see whether Naruto was there, but when she arrived she stood motionless as she laid her eyes on her boyfriend fighting a dozen of himself on top of the water. She watched attack after attack, fire being breathed out of his mouth, water being used as a deterrent and wind being used as blades. She never saw him fight this hard before. She watched the clones and Naruto engaged in hand-to-hand combat. It was fast-paced. She realized that during their sessions he was holding back a good amount of power. The sparring ended in a span of 5 minutes as she finally managed to drag herself to the deck and watched him heal from the cuts and bruises on his upper body. "You okay, babe?" she asked, looking at him. He was wet from the water, but he definitely looked hot and sexy, with the water dripping from his hair. "No hope, focus, you're here for a reason." "Hey, yeah, I'm good, thanks." He smiled before removing the tape from his hands. "What about you, princess? You have enough time for me now that you're not dancing with Raphael?" He asked and stared at the girl. Hope narrowed her eyes, frowning at the implication. "What do you mean you've been avoiding me since the party?" Naruto rolled his eyes. "No, I wasn't avoiding you, I was giving you time to figure out what you want because my girlfriend seems to be attracted to the mutt, so forgive me for being pissed off, Hope," he said as he roughly shoved his gear in the duffel bag. "I'm not attracted to Raph, what are you talking about?" she asked pleadingly. "Hope, I feel your emotions, don't lie to me please. If you don't want this," pointing between the two of them, "all you have to say is the word and end it, because clearly I'm not good enough for you," he said before walking away. "Naruto, wait." She ran after him, grabbing his arm. "What, Hope? Can we talk about us later? But we need to get to Dr. Saltzman because someone else was raised from the dead." His eyes widened slightly before he nodded. "Who?" "Cassie, Raphael's girlfriend that's died," she said softly. He rolled his eyes. "Yeah, I'll meet you there. I want to make sure the barrier is secure later, Mikhailson," he said before disappearing, and realized that Naruto was more than jealous. He was angry, and maybe he was right. She felt a small attraction to Raphael, but she was never going to act on it because she was steadily falling in love with her blonde-haired, was afraid to show her feelings because on this day she remembered more than ever how easily she loses people. Another reason she doesn't celebrate Remembrance Day. In the basement, Naruto finds Alaric shouting, swinging the axe as far back as he could be, slamming it into Necromancer ahead, the axe staying in his head, not affecting him in the slightest. He chuckles at the sight. "Was that necessary, Rick?" he asked, stepping into the cell looking at the stitched-up man. It wasn't a pretty sight. It reminded him of Orochimaru's experiments. "Yeah, we need answers and we've been at this for days, Naruto. I find it incredibly weird why this guy gave himself up willingly, so I want to know what his angle is beside the knife, of course." Naruto nodded and made a Rasengan in his palm. "Let's see if this will make Frankenstein talk." He smirked evilly before shoving the blue energy orb in the necromancer's stomach. He watched the necromancer's eyes open wide and with his mouth parted in a scream mixed with a groaning. "Ah!" Naruto laughs and nudges Rick. Finally got a reaction out of him. Alaric chuckles with Naruto before they can continue. They're interrupted by Hope. "Dr. Saltzman," she says, looking to the man before he could respond. The necromancer decides to weigh in his opinion. "Oh, there you are, lovely girl. I was wondering if you'd come visit me again. How's your friend, the one I saw you with earlier, trying to steal an illicit peek at me?" As we speak, he's having an emotional reunion with his dead girlfriend. "I assume we have you to thank." she said sarcastically and glanced at her blonde boyfriend who was watching with his arms folded. Poor thing. Her spirit was clinging to him like a vine in winter. It took barely a little wrinkle of the nose, and poof. You're lucky that's all I did. The way you've treated a man of my stature, you should be ashamed. Alaric exits the cell with Naruto after they put away all the torture devices. Naruto ignores the man speaking, but Alaric can't take his inane chattering any longer and screams. Literally nobody knows who you are. He says frustrated. Naruto knows why Alaric's frustrated. They've talked about it, but having his fiancée die for a second time had hit him harder than he anticipated. He decided to get the man away from the necromancer before he lost, whispered in Rick's ear. He's trying to work you up, don't let him. He saw the man nod. The necromancer scoffs. He doesn't like the way the blonde ignores him, and he even hurt him with that blue thing. He wasn't sure what spell it was, but he was needed to get the girl alone. She looked easier to manipulate. Naruto and I will check of Raph, he says to Hope. They were about to exit, but Naruto heard the necromancer speak. If you want an end to this misery, simply bring me the knife and I'll be on my way. Naruto watched Hope, clearly intrigued by the monster. He sighed. He hoped the girl wouldn't do anything, went back and took her hand, leading her out of the cellar. Following behind, bends down and whispers in her ear. I really hope you aren't planning anything stupid, Hope, she said sternly. Hope rolls her eyes. You don't trust me? Naruto sighs softly while looking at the girl. I do trust you, but he plays with people's heads. Hope, I just hope you're smart enough to not fall it, he said before catching up with Alaric. They entered Alaric's office. Naruto poured himself a drink. He saw Hope look at him strangely but said had gone to find Raphael. I take it things aren't going well? Asked Hope as she sat on the sofa. Naruto sipped on his drink, leaning against the desk. He's a diva, he shrugged. Hope watched her boyfriend strangely, becoming a day drinker at such a young age. She asked, pointing out that he was pouring himself a second drink before putting the bottle back in its place. He chuckled dryly. Perhaps, but this guy rubs me the wrong way, toying with people's minds. He shook his head and swallowed the remainder of his drink. It's sickening. He walked over to the sofa and sat down, massaging his temples. So what's the plan? I know neither you or Dr. Saltzman want to give over the knife, but we can't have him raising the lost loved ones of everyone in this school. We'll handle it. I'll rip him limb from limb if I have to, he said sternly. All I'm saying is the methods are not working, Naru, she said softly. He got up from the sofa and gave her a kiss to her lips. We'll handle it, Hope, please just leave it alone, okay? I need to go find Rick and try and see whether I can get more answers on how to effectively end him, he said before he left. Are we okay? She asked softly. We'll talk later when we have more time. Hope, stay safe. All right, I'll be gone for a couple of hours. The girl nodded and watched him leave. Naruto finds Alaric sitting near the couches with the young couple, trying to explain what happened and why his dead girlfriend rose from the dead. Naruto knows it's becoming increasingly difficult for his friend to rehash the story of his dead fiancée returning from the dead only to have to kill her once more in order to keep his daughters and school safe. He hates the fact that he can't help. The man listens to Alaric explaining to Cassie that she's actually dead. He closes his eyes, trying to calm his anger. He's angry at the necromancer, at Malivore for spawning these creatures now, and he's angry at himself for not being able to stop it from happening. Things are spinning and he needs to get a handle on it before they lose. Decides to try and enter the dragon realm to see whether they have any books or information on this necromancer. He looks over and nods his head to Alaric, who's finishing up with the young couple. You heard? Asks the headmaster grimly. Naruto sighs softly. I did, he answers the man before gesturing to walk outside. Alaric follows, stare off into the woods, watching the wind blow through the trees. Are you okay, Alaric? I'm worried about you, man. He asked while still looking to the woods. He heard the man sigh heavily. I'm trying to be. I lost my fiancé for a second time, and then I had to ask my daughters to kill their biological mother. He swallowed back a sob before looking to his blonder partner with glassy eyes. What kind of father am I? Naruto shook his head. A good father. You're a father who puts the safety of his daughters before anything else. You're a father who puts their needs before yours. He grips the Mont's shoulder tightly, trying to convey empathy and understanding, or as much as he possibly could. And most of all, Alaric Saltzman, you put their happiness before yours. Don't doubt yourself because some fucking monster came out of nowhere and is playing with your mind. That's what he wants. He wants to break your mind. He said before letting the Mont's shoulder go. Don't let anyone do that ever, because if you do, they've won, Rick. He finished his impromptu speech. They stood in silence for a minute before Alaric chuckled. Are you sure you're 17? You sound a 100 inches, he joked. Naruto laughed with the man. Sometimes I feel like I'm a 100 with everything I've gone through. I just don't want to lose the best friend I've made in this world, that's all. He said the last part seriously because it was true. Hope wasn't his best friend, she was his lover, future wife if he was lucky, but Alaric was his best friend despite the age difference. You're mine too, he shrugged. Good to know we're like those two in The Heat, that movie with Sandra Bullock, I think. He acts. You're very professional and I'm the potty mouth, he laughed. No, no, no. The man shook his head in horror. No, but seriously, I'm going to the Dragon's Realm to see if they have any information on the necromancer in the libraries. I'll be a couple of hours. Make sure Hope doesn't do anything stupid, please, he asked the man, and Alaric nodded. Will do, bro, he said, but grimaced the way bro sounded from his mouth. Naruto on the other hand laughed. Don't ever say that again. Yane. He waved before performing the signs and disappearing. Hope enters the Salvatore library. She sees Dorian on the highest shelf from the ladder. Anything yet? She asks. Necromancy is everywhere in occult literature. It's a form of sorcery that dates back to ancient Greece. It involves the ability to communicate with and raise the dead. He begins to climb down from the ladder and sighs before closing the book. But there is nothing about a specific necromancer, so whoever this dude is, he's been erased from history like every other monster that comes looking for the knife. He begins to walk away, but Hope speaks once more. Is there any way to stop him from bringing back dead people? Because if this week is any indication, it's kinda becoming a weekly thing. Dorian moves to different bookshelves and he puts the books away and answers Hope. I'll look into tomorrow, I'm off today, he said, finishing up his task. Evil never takes an off day, Dorian. Well, I do anything else you need. Speak to Dr. Saltzman or your boyfriend, he said. What? How do you know? She asked, surprised. The older man laughed. We're bros, he shrugged before walking away. I am going to pretend I didn't hear that you said you're bros with my 17-year-old boyfriend. It's very weird. I'm worried about Dr. Saltzman though. Dorian sighed. He was worried too, but he saw how Naruto allowed the man to grieve the proper way and not drown his worries in a bottle of whiskey. He's allowed to be off, Hope. Besides, Naruto is good for him. He's working it out. Don't worry, he said before exiting the library, leaving the tribrid by herself. Hope exits the library and sees Alaric distracted with Naruto outside and decided this is her chance. She takes a deep breath before leaving and going to the cellar. As soon as she entered, she heard the necromancer speak. You have the lovely stench of death on you, my girl, he says, watching her approach him. I thought maybe we could talk, she said, and she magically undid his chains that Alaric had put on him earlier. Such a puny creature dares to stroke a deal with me, the almighty necromancer. He asked, insulted by the girl's blatant disregard on his stature. Here's the thing, you don't exist. Someone or something sent you here, he cut her off rudely. No one gets in my mind. My head is a steel trap. Stop trying to play mind games with me, girl, he said firmly. Hope sighed and tried to reason with the necromancer, asking him questions. However, they came across a strange symbol. She asked what it. Necromancer stared at the symbol wide-eyed. Duh. That symbol means permanent death. When Naruto disappeared, Alaric made his way back inside to where the young couple sat. He saw Cassie with a phone in her hand. She explained that she wanted to call her mother. Alaric sighed inwardly. He knew this was going to be difficult, but he kept Naruto's words in his mind. That's not a good idea, Cassie. We don't know whether this is permanent or. He trailed off sadly. You mean I'll die again? She asked, holding back a sob. I'm sorry, I wish I could give you an answer, but we have been searching for answers, so right now I can't give you a definitive answer. For now, is there anything else I can get you? Quote. A shower, she said. No problem, that can be arranged, he said. Getting girl turned to face her boyfriend. Then I'd like to get to the bottom of how you killed me, she said. Alaric decided that was his cue to leave. Dragon's Realm. Naruto was sitting in the library that was kept by the dragons. He created 100 clones that were flipping through books like their lives depended on it. Boss, I've got something here, said the clone, and Naruto called him over and read the book page the clone was pointing to. He expresses joy in killing. More than that, he views people as objects or toys. He forces others to do his bidding, knowing it causes harm to the destroys the quality of life in his victims. It is a game he plays for personal amusement. Thus, we hate him. The hate comes from Necromancer's lack of respect for life in all of its forms. This is exactly what the Necromancer is trying to do by raising the dead, he muttered to himself as his clone nodded along with him. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, he sighs, and checks his watch. Has been gone about 2 hours on Earth. See whether we can get any information on how to kill him, he ordered his clones before they got to work. He continued paging through the book he was busy with. He came across a page and stared at it. It was the exact same guy they were dealing with. It wasn't surprising that the information was here but not on Earth, since Malivore apparently removes all memory of the creature ever existing. He read through the information that was on the following page and realized that this guy loved speaking about himself. He probably got someone to write his memoirs or something. Baka. He chuckled. Reading through the history of the Necromancer, he saw something interesting. The Necromancer gained his powers by invoking the evil spirits and used a charmed blade as a medium. He is immortal, however, he can be killed by the blade that was used in the ritual. Unfortunately, throughout the years the blade was lost, and the last known location was Mont Saint-Michel in France, a church built in the 8th century. Snapping the book closed. Yes. He cheered, though it was weird that he hid the blade in a church considering he was considered to be evil and the opposite of holy. Naruto shrugged to himself. No use getting caught up in the details, he thought. He decided to get back to the school to give the information to Alaric so that they could start searching for the blade. The book even had a description of it, so he hoped it wouldn't be too difficult, and most all he hoped that it was still there, but knowing that the Necromancer disappeared after being taken by Malivore, he was sure no one ever thought to look for this blade. He dispelled his clones quickly and stood still for a minute, letting all the information process through his brain. Damn it, I need to stop doing that, he scolded himself. Performing the signs quickly, he disappeared in a cloud of smoke. He arrived near the front doors of the school. It was already 6 p.m. the evening. He made his way to Alaric's office. He hoped the older man was successful in getting some answers. He opened the door to screaming. It was Hope's voice. Stop acting like a disappointed father. You are not my dad, Rick. He looked to the occupants in the room. Alaric looked tired. By the bags under his eyes and the way his jaw was clenched, it was clear he wasn't very successful in finding answers. Well, probably less successful than him. Hope, on the other hand, looked angry, frustrated if how tightly her jaw was clenched was any. Both turned their heads at the sound of the door opening and stared at the blonde. You're back. Find anything? asked Alaric. Naruto turned to the man and nodded. I did, but first, do you mind telling me why the two of you look and sound like you're at each other's throats? He looked between the two. He saw Hope lower her head. He turned to Alaric with a brow raised. What happened, Rick? He asked much more seriously. Alaric sighed and shaking his head as he spoke. The Necromancer escaped. Naruto's hand tightened around the doorknob so hard that it broke off. Okay, he escaped. How, and is the knife safe? He threw gritted teeth. No, the knife is gone, and now he has the first key to unleash Malivore apparently, said the man through his doorknob Naruto was holding fell to the ground. Alaric, please explain to me how we let that fucker get away. I know the only magic or person who has magic strong enough to break through the barrier I placed was. He trailed off, looking to the auburn-haired girl who now had tears in her eyes. He narrowed his own orange-reddish eyes at the girl. What did you do, Hope? He said, restraining his frustration at the girl's idiocy. I did what you could and I got answers. She defended herself, crossing her arms defiantly at her boyfriend's tone. I asked you one thing. Using his finger for emphasis. One thing, Hope, and that was to not do anything stupid. Do you have any idea what you've done? He didn't wait for her to answer. No, you don't, because now that Malivore has one key, who's to say that they'll keep sending one monster or creature or whatever the fuck? We don't know where the other two keys are. Meaning you've put so many people at risk trying to get your answers. He finished off and waited for the girl's reply. What could be so important that you'd be willing to let him get away with the knife? Hope. He stepped closer to the girl. He hadn't noticed that Alaric exited the office, leaving the two of them by themselves. My father, okay. She started crying now. He said my father wasn't at peace until I was, and I needed to get answers, so I asked MG to do a head dive while I traveled through his subconscious. Naruto put his forehead to Hope's and spoke softly. He didn't want to scare his girlfriend, nor did he like seeing her cry. Her father was important to her, but what she did to get those answers were reckless and stupid. Sighing softly, he played with your mind, princess. He messes people up. You need to realize father, like any good father, is at peace, because from what I heard he saved his daughter. He saved the one person in his life that made him feel different, a beautiful miracle that gave him purpose. Hope, why do you keep torturing yourself? While he was talking, he slid his arms around her waist. Everything he told her was what he heard from Alaric. The man told him that Nicholas Mikhailson died to keep his daughter safe, and that was all he told him, and said anything else needs to come from Hope herself. He gave her time to open up, but it was difficult to break her walls, because for years she kept people out, not wanting to lose anyone close to her because she felt like a curse or burden. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought it would help. I really did. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, to have to believe me, she said sincerely against his kissed her head. I do believe you, Hope, but you have to think about the consequences of your actions. I'll be better. Okay. And I don't want to hide us anymore if you promise that you'll try not to die, she said, lifting her head off his chest. He chuckled softly. I'm immortal, Hope. I don't think I could, he joked, trying to ease the heavy atmosphere. No, even immortals find a way to die, so you have to promise me, she said, her eyes now a steely blue, that showed her seriousness. I can't say that I won't die if immortals find a way to die, but I can promise that if I ever do, I'll climb out from the pits of hell to come back to you. Pecking her lips. Is that good enough? He asked with a brow raised. For now, I guess. She chuckled dryly. He laughed with her and tilted her chin and kissed her lips. When the lips met, it worked in harmony. The kiss was soft and traces circles on her, his tongue on her bottom lip, begging for entry. The girl gave it to him easily. Their tongues danced with each other in perfect harmony. A sound like a ringing bell broke their look down to Hope's bracelet, making the sound. Why? And what in God's name is that? He asked, looking at the bracelet and back at the girl. Hope bit her lip and looked at her boyfriend before she took a deep breath and answered. I gave Landon a distress beacon, so to speak, and he needed to push it if he was in trouble, which I guess he is. I need to go, she rambled quickly. Naruto grabbed her arm before pulling her back and kissed her hard before he. Wait, he was cut off by Alaric coming through the door, out of breath. We've got a problem. There's a huge hydra in the lake, he said, breathing heavily. Fuck. He looked between the two. Okay, Rick, you go with Hope to go see what that hobbit got himself into, and I'll deal with the hydra, he said before kissing Hope one last time. Be safe and come back to me, he whispered before he left. Fucking hydras, he muttered and disappeared in a red flash. Chapter 12. Naruto Pav. I sunshine to the lake. Since the barrier was down, I didn't even think about how this creature had gotten in the lake of the school. It was weird and needed to be killed before the students were put in danger. I arrived on the deck by the lake. The sky was dark, the moon providing the only light as I stared at the creature. It was a large three-headed creature that resembled a dragon and a snake with translucent white skin, or scales to be exact. Alright, this is going to be tougher than I thought. I thought to myself. I created 3 shadow clones. Alright guys, I need you to distract him, alright? Hi boss. They answered and jumped off to engage the big 3-headed monster. They fought using taijutsu. They weren't making any headway, but they were being used as a distraction long enough for me to power up 2 Fuden Rasenshurikens. I created a 2 Rasengans in my left and right hand, adding element my wind to the blue energy orb. I applied the necessary amount of chakra to my feet and dashed across the lake. Leaping into the air, I launched the 2 attacks. Fuden Rasenshuriken. I threw it at the distracted creature. I watched as it sliced 2 of the heads clean off. The blood sprayed like a geyser. I was about to walk away when I heard one of my clones scream, "It's not over yet, boss." I turned back and stared wide-eyed at the creature sprouting 4 new heads where the previous ones were decapitated. Fuck, I said. It must have regeneration abilities. This was going to be like fighting a better-looking Orochimaru. You know that sound weird because I'm pretty sure he had a thing for little boys, considering the hickey he gave Sasuke. No. Focus Uzumaki. Okay, so I used wind mixed with pure chakra and it regenerated well. What about ha? Yes. Fire, that's got to be it. I was cut off by my thoughts by the monster launching something from his mouth. I managed to dodge in time, but somehow it got on my clothes. Ah. Ripping off my t-shirt, I watched that venom or acid, whatever he spat, left a nasty burn. Must be about 2nd degree by the looks of it. Flipping through signs, I decided 10 make more shadow clones. Alright guys, on my signal we're going to burn this fucker. Okay. The strongest fire jutsu we've got. I shouted at my 10 clones who now around me. We surrounded the beast. I was the closest, flipping through the signs of the Kaiden jutsu at the same time, and the sounds of shouts echoed in the empty expanse of the lake. Kaiden. Guka Mekyaku no Jutsu, was screamed, and the sky lit up with flames. After a few seconds of the fire raging, I looked to see whether the creature was dead or burned to ash. Hopefully he was, because if fire didn't destroy him I might have to tap at my Yuki or Sage mode to kill him. I neared the creature, who was laying half inside and outside of the lake. The flames started to die down. It was hot, scorching actually, and the burn on my arm was taking longer to heal than normal. I heard the dying screech of the dragon, snake-like looking creature. Breathing a sigh of relief, it was over. I dispelled my clones as I turned my back. I felt claws raking across my flesh in my back. Groaning at the sensation, I fell down to one knee. "Ah fuck, what the hell, I thought you were dead," I muttered, gritting my teeth. I turned my head to look back and watched the creature give me a smirk. I assume because I'm not sure whether this thing can smile or speak, but it looked very cocky to me, like it got in one last hit before it died. "Ha, I'm calling you Orochimaru, by the way," I muttered for good measure. I used another fire jutsu to ensure it burned up. I could feel the blood running down my back. Finally it was dead. I walked back to the school but heard something from the woods. I turned back. Changing my eyes to my demon eyes, I saw 10 people in uniform for infiltration. It was all black. They didn't look like they wanted to enroll their students in the school either. "Hey!" I shouted as I watched them. Still, their movements, from their scent I could tell that they were just humans, but dangerous, arms with guns. "Who are you?" I asked, walking closer. I took in their movements. It was guarded. They were ready to kill. There 2 behind me, another 2 flanking my sides, and 6 in front of me with their weapons pointed at my upper body. Tiny red dots lighting up on my skin. "I asked you a question. What are you doing on private property?" I asked again. I formulated a plan in my head. If they were a threat to the students I would kill them quickly. I had 3 kunai with tags so I could use them before they managed to fire a weapon at me. "Who we are none of your concern. Just know that your existence is an abomination," sneered their guy in front of me. He stared at me with what I identified as disgust and hatred. I was used to those kind of looks from the villagers back in the elemental nations. It wasn't anything new. My mouth curled into smirk as I chuckled dryly at the man. "Is that so?" I didn't wait for his answer. I reached in my back pocket for the kunai and threw it quickly at the positions I scoped out. "Then I don't need to be gentle then," I said, and disappeared in a red flash and slaughtered them. I killed them quickly, elongating my fingernails into claws and slit. Their shots rang out in the woods. One of it made itself into my arm. I flinched. "That hurts," looking to the guy who dropped his gun, trying to get away, obviously terrified after he watched his colleagues or friends murdered in a blink of an eye. Grabbing his throat roughly, shaking my head mockingly at the man as I held him against the tree. "You're going to give me answers." I stared into his eyes. My own was blazing red. I felt bad killing them. I always did whenever I took a life, but these people were killers. They would kill any supernatural creature, good or bad. It didn't matter whether they murdered a child, from the way the leader spoke. "Who sent you?" I asked. The man, probably in his early 20s, shook his head, refusing to answer, sighing inwardly. I didn't feel like torturing him, but I needed answers, and the quickest way was to put him in a level genjutsu. "Megan. Narukumi no Jutsu," I whispered. "This jutsu would let him see something horrible, well, maybe more horrible than what I just let him witness." I let him out the hold I had him in as I heard him scream, No, make it stop, please." I felt bad for the man. Even though it was a low-level genjutsu, these people had no chakra, so he would be able to dispel it. I waited a few more seconds as I watched him scratch at his face while rolling on the ground, begging for it to stop. Putting my hands together and interlocking my fingers, I whispered, "Kai." Kneeling down to the man, I watched. He opened his eyes and tried to scramble away from me, but I grabbed his leg. "Are you ready to talk now?" He nodded frantically. Please, I'll tell you anything. Who sent you? Repeating the same question. I work for a group called the Triad. I don't know everything because I'm not that high on the ladder, but, the man started stuttering. Sighing to myself, must be the after effects. Whatever he saw must have been pretty gruesome. I waited patiently for him to gather his thoughts. All I was told was to come here and kill the headmaster. That's all, I promise. I nodded. I pulled out my phone. The screen was cracked from my fight earlier. I found Alaric's number. Can you let me go, please? I promise I'll never come here again, he pleaded. Unfortunately, I couldn't let him go. They knew about me. Not yet, buddy. What does this triad do? And why do they want the headmaster dead? I asked the sniveling man, who now had tears running down his cheeks and light red marks in his face from his fingernails. We guard a pit, and make sure abominations are forgotten, he said somewhat proudly. I narrowed my eyes at the phrasing he used. It was clear that this triad, whatever they were bad news. I lifted him up, reaching up to his neck, giving him a quick death. I'm sorry, but I can't let you go, I whispered. Snap. I watched the man fall limply to the ground with his eyes still opened. I looked away and put my hands together and offered a small prayer. Have mercy on my soul, Cammy, I whispered softly. I could sense two people approaching from the school. I gathered the bodies quickly before performing a Doden jutsu to make a deep hole. I put their bodies inside and finished with a fire jutsu and closed back the hole. The steps were closer and I looked to the side and saw Emma and MG standing there looking at me. I'm sure they were looking at my body because the claw marks on my back still hasn't healed, but I was pretty sure it would take a day or two before it closed up completely. Naruto, what happened? Asked Emma. I gave the woman a small smile and walked toward her. Don't worry, we'll discuss it later. I need you to patch me up. And I need to call Rick. The woman nodded while MG watched my back, or specifically my blood. I saw the black veins start underneath his eyes. His eyes dilated and turned completely black. He used his vamp speed and I grabbed him by his neck, snapping it quickly before lifting him up on my shoulder and turned to the shocked witchy guidance counselor. I'm not fond of being sucked unless it's Hope. I tried to joke, but the woman snapped out of her daze and hit my arm. That's disgusting, Naruto. Now come on, we need to deal with that wound before Hope and Alaric gets back, she said scoldingly. Hey, you had dirty thoughts. I was referring to when she embraces her immortality, I said, thinking about the fact we haven't spoken about it, but I hope she would. You've talked about it? She asked carefully. I looked to the woman. She was in counselor mode. He smiled and shook his head. No, not yet, but with everything happening, we haven't had enough for our relationship, and it doesn't seem like it's going to calm down any time now either, I sighed heavily. We walked through the halls. It was nearing 2 a.m. and most of the students were woken up by the sounds of a fight. They watched me carefully. I called Caleb over and handed MG to him. Caleb, make sure MG gets something to drink. All right, I told the dark-skinned vampire. Sure, man, you look rough. Stating the obvious. I scratched my head impishly. I fought a fucking Hydra, dude. Of course I look rough, I deadpanned. Language, scolded the guidance counselor. I waved her off and told Caleb I'd see him later. Let's get going, Emma, before these people get a free show, I said suggestively while the woman just shook her head. You're incorrigible, she muttered. After I had the wounds cleaned, treated and bandaged by a very irate Emma who clearly did not like being awake at 2 in the morning, I dialed Alaric's number and waited for him to answer. Hello, Naruto, you okay? Yeah, I'm good. I ran into some other trouble though. You and Hope need to get back to the school, Rick. It's important. Yeah, about that. Landon is with us and he stole or activated or whatever, but we found the next key, he rattled off quickly. What the fuck is up with Sticky Fingers? He's changing from Frodo to the fucking golem, did he say? My precious, to when he stole the next key? I asked cynically. I didn't wait for his response. Just get back here, Rick. I have information that might put this entire situation in perspective, I said tiredly. We're driving back now. I'll be there in a 1 hour tops. Sure, and don't stop for anything, I said seriously. What? What? Why? The confusion clear in his voice. Just please trust me and don't stop for anything, I said before ending the call. I fell forward on my stomach on the bed and the nurses to the witch in the chair. Will you explain what happened now? She asked in her very British accent. I'll explain it when Rick gets here. I don't feel like repeating myself. I'm gonna nap now. Wake me up when they're here, I finished off sleepily. Hope's Pav. I fell asleep after the whole ordeal with Landon finding his mother, and apparently she decided she didn't want to be a mother. The boy was crushed and tried to get comfort from me, but I rebuffed his advances and told him there was nothing between us because I was in a relationship. I was happy regardless of everything that was happening in between. And now we were driving back to the school. I fell asleep but woke up when I heard Alaric talking to someone. I heard my boyfriend's voice. It sounded tired and angry. I waited for Alaric to finish the call before I looked at the phone, seeing that the line went dead. What's wrong? Is Naruto okay? I asked worriedly since we left him by himself to fight a Hydra. I heard the man sigh. He's okay, but something's wrong. We need to get back. I nodded and listened to him and put my head against the headrest. And closed my eyes. I heard Alaric speak again. Are you going to tell him that you kissed Landon tonight? It sounded like he was angry, even concerned. Before I could answer, if you do, he'll probably kill him. I sighed and turned to look out the window and answered, not that it's any of your concern, Dr. Saltzman, but Landon kissed me and I pushed him back. That's what you saw. I would never cheat on Naruto. I stopped and rephrased my sentence. I care about him very much, I said, smiling. I knew I was in love with him, but I wouldn't want to tell Alaric that first. I wanted Naruto to hear it first. I glanced at Alaric in the corner of my eye and he smiled. By the way, why do you care so much about us? I asked curiously, and to be honest, I never thought I would hear the words from Alaric's mouth ever. We bros, he said easily. My eyes snapped in his direction. Oh God, not you too. I groaned dramatically. I heard the man laugh for the first time in a while. When did you get so close though? I'm starting to think he goes on dates with you instead, I asked seriously. You know, when we were gone for a week? I nodded my head. Well, we went to Dragon Realm and I met real speaking dragons. Hope. It was quite the experience, but that week was basically a year to us, he said. My eyes widened. Wow, that's amazing. So you had a year to get to know each other then? He just nodded. Yeah, he's crazy about you, Hope. I hope you realize that. I smiled, blushing slightly because I was crazy about him too and I missed him. I decided I would sleep in his bed tonight like we had done before. Nothing happened, of course, other than heavy makeout sessions and cuddling. He was an amazing cuddler, especially when he let his tails wrap around me. I know, I murmured at the time. I didn't realize that Landon was awake listening to the entire conversation, but I didn't care really. I was in love with my blonde-haired fox, and I have to tell him that and show him too by opening up completely about everything that comes with the Mikhailson name. Chapter 13. Naruto was lying with his face down, comfortably on the bed in the infirmary. He was tired out. He used a lot more chakra than normal since he arrived, and this heard his phone go off with a text message waking him from his power nap. Taking the phone out underneath the pillow, he saw two messages, one from Hope and Alaric. Tribrid Princess. Hey, where are you? I checked your room but you're not there, babe. Rick. Hey Naruto, where are you? He replied to both of them saying he was in the infirmary. He sat up, looking over at the chair next to the bed sat Emma sleeping. He wondered why the woman stayed. They spoke to each other, but it was more about Hope than him really, and their course. She respected her patient's privacy, but she would make sure to check in with him too whenever Hope was in a mood. He heard the door open, accompanied by a gasp from his Tribrid princess. She ran over to him, looking him over, frowning at the bandage that was wrapped around his chest and back. You said you were okay, baby. What happened? She asked hysterically, gesturing to the wounds, while Alaric, who now joined, saw as well. I guess a Hydra has claws. Hope narrowed her eyes at his nonchalant tone. Of course they do. How did you? Never mind, I thought you would heal already. Naruto scratched his head and smiled at the girl. Probably a day or two, depends. I think there was a poison underneath its claws, so it might take a while, he said, rubbing the girl's hands. Are you okay? What happened with the golem? Alaric chuckled at the new nickname. Well, we've got another key to Malivore, meaning more monster attacks. We found his mother, and apparently Landon is connected to Malivore somehow, and that's why he's able to find these keys and activate them, said the man, explaining the events. Naruto nodded his head. I see. Well, Alaric, humans wanted to infiltrate the school. They're called Triad, and they were after you. Apparently you're interfering with their goal, he explained, looking between the occupants in the room. Hope now sat next to him with her head on his shoulder. He recounted the events that occurred in their absence, leaving out the gory details of how he obtained the information, and glossing over their deaths. He felt Hope tense in his arms slightly when he looked at the time. It was nearing 5 a.m. He needed proper rest. Wow, so that's everything we missed, murmured Hope. I'm sorry I wasn't able to fight with you, Naruto. He shrugged and kissed her head. Don't worry about it, I'm glad you're safe. It was Sunday morning. I'm going to sleep, I'll see you later, Rick, he said to the man and pulled Hope along to his room. When they entered, he went to lay down on the bed and took off his jeans and shoes, leaving him in his jockey and socks. He still wasn't able to lay on his back, so he laid down on his stomach and patted the space next to him. Come here, you look like you want to say something, he said gently. Hope smiled and undressed herself, taking one of her boyfriend's t-shirts and putting it on over her underwear. The t-shirt covered her, just about covered her thighs. She makes herself comfortable on the bed, playing with Naruto's blonde locks. When everything happened, Landon kissed me. I pushed him away, of course, and said I was in a relationship with you, she admitted quietly. She watched her boyfriend's reaction as he turned on his side and put his cheek on his open palm. Can I kill him? He asked seriously. No. No what? She widened her eyes at his response. She expected jealousy and anger, but not enough for plotting his death. It was very much like her Uncle Cole. Not even maim him? He whined before the girl kissed him. No murdering or maiming the human baby. She rolled her eyes. Well, I'm happy that you're okay with us being public. I've seen you in the halls wearing that short skirt, looking absolutely sexy, and don't not to mention the sway in your hips, princess, very tempting. He smirked at the blush on Hope's face. You're a pervert, you know that. He laughed. I know, blame my godfather and sensei. He used to peek on the woman in the hot springs, claiming it brought him inspiration for his erotic novels, he said, remembering how often Jiraiya was beat up by Tsunade for peeking. I hope you're not making it a thing with spying on girls in the shower, she said sternly, narrowing her eyes at her boyfriend's innocent smile. Ah no, there's only one girl I'd like to spy on, he said easily, using the other hand to trace circles on his Hope's smooth, milky thighs. And who would that be? She humored him. Well, she's beautiful. He took her hand, intertwined their fingers, laying a soft kiss on the back of it. She's definitely one of a kind, punctuating each statement with a kiss. She has light blue eyes, he said as he sat up, now leaning over the girl, moving his lips to her neck as he continued. She smells like the forest. After a light drizzle, he sucked on her pulse point. He heard Hope pant slightly, and even if she didn't sleep for a week straight, she'd still be the most gorgeous girl in the room, he said honestly. Do you have any idea who I might be talking about, Miss Mikaelson? He asked near her ear. Hope moaned softly at the sensations she was feeling. Maybe, but just tell me more about her to be safe, she said, breathing slightly heavier. Hey, well, there's so many more things to say. She's brave, kiss, smart, kiss, very adorable when she pouts, kiss, I just so happen to be falling in love with her. He gave her a toe-curling kiss that went on a minute or two before they broke for air. And she's got amazing boobs, he joked. Oh God, you were being sweet, then you spoiled it, she laughed and punched his arm softly. Hey, I'm injured, woman. Treat me with care, he whined in response. Hope rolled her eyes and pulled him down. Lay here, I want to talk to you. He looked up from his spot on her breasts. Sounds important, he asked lightly. The girl out his head on her chest and took a deep breath. It is. I should have done this a while ago, but I told you I was scared. I still am, and seeing you get hurt like this makes me worry even more, she said, running her fingers through his hair. My father was the original hybrid, my mother the werewolf alpha. She began to tell him her story from what she could remember as a child, from what her aunts told her happened when she was a baby. She told him about how her father sent her away from New Orleans, her kingdom, while he made sure her home was safe enough for her to return. She told him about how when she was 7 she met her family and her father for the first time since she was a baby. I was 7 and an ancient magic was in me. I lived with it for a couple of months until it made me hear whispers. It was awful, she said. Her voice had broken slightly as she was telling him about her past. It hurt. She never really discussed it with him or anyone really, and now the dam was bursting. He raised his head and reversed their positions as he leaned against the headboard, holding the girl between his legs, and allowed her to cry into his chest. You don't have to continue if it's too difficult, princess, he said softly. It saddened him that she went through hell since before she was born, People trying to kill her just like him, but the difference was she had a family that would go to the ends of the world to protect her. No, no, I want to just keep holding me, please. She half pleaded. Always, princess, always, he said softly. For a moment everything was quiet and the only sounds that was heard in the room was their heartbeats, and broke the silence and started talking. It got too much, my 7-year-old body couldn't handle an ancient spirit and everything else at the same time. My family made a sacrifice. My aunt wasn't as the strongest witch after my grandmother Esther and grand-aunt Dahlia. She used a spell that took the hollow out of me and split it amongst my father, my Uncle Cole, Uncle Elijah and Aunt Rebecca. The sacrifice was that we couldn't be in the same place, never mind the same state, so each of them traveled to different parts of the world, while still promising always and forever. She paused and took a breath. My family wanted me to get a normal education, so I was sent here to live and attend school. Instead of my real surname I used my mother's, so I went by Hope Marshall. Did you see or speak to your father? Letters and phone calls. I missed him dearly. One day I decided to do a spell I learned from my aunt. It's kind of like a visual representation of me being where my dad was but not really being there. I was scared and I missed him, so I tried to see him because he stopped sending letters for a while and I didn't know why, but when I saw him he was in the middle of slaughtering people, she said sadly, shaking her head at the memory. The hollow was difficult to control, it gave you terrible impulses and my father fell victim to it. I had never seen him so angry before, so violent, because that wasn't the father that would call me princess or the man that loved art and painted with me. Naruto imagined himself in her position. It would be a shock for 7-8-year-old girl who grew up sheltered from the violence and cruelty of the world. I'm sure he hated that you saw him like that, Hope. He probably wanted to keep his little princess shielded from violence and cruelty. I would do the same for my daughter, he admitted quietly. In his mind he was picturing a blonde little girl with the bluest eyes and a little button nose. Definitely Hope's eyes, he thought with a sigh. He felt the girl acknowledge his words with a nod. I realized that, but I missed my dad and I waited and waited for him to explain why I saw him like that, to try and explain why he was angry at me. She choked back a sob. I waited years but nothing, not a peep, not a letter or phone call. I started to question my mother more, but she couldn't give me answers, only told me that he loved me wherever he was. He rubbed soft circles on her back. What happened? He asked, not knowing what really to expect. I acted out at school. I broke the rules expecting my dad to come, but my mom showed up and I did something. Naru, I did something stupid and reckless. I trusted a boy too easily and the plan I had fell through. My dad came home, but with two of us being so close to each other, bad things started to happen. Snakes coming out of nowhere. The whispers got worse. She told him what happened to her mother, being kidnapped and dying to save her. She died because of me. She struggled to breath. It was the telling signs of a panic attack as she rehashed her mother's death. She felt lips against her cheeks. She opened her eyes to see her boyfriend kissing away her tears. His voice became clearer, no longer muffled, as she followed his instructions. There you go, breathe my love. There you go, you're safe, I'm here. He reassured her over and over until she calmed down completely. Are you all right? He cupped her cheeks, staring deep into her baby blues. She nodded, biting her bottom lip to stop it from trembling. Now listen to me, okay? He said firmly as he tucked Hope's hair behind her ears. You made a mistake, yes. You trusted someone and they failed you, but Hope, you cannot blame yourself or torture yourself for the decisions of others. It will break you, and this guilt you carry hurts only yourself and your mother, who's surely watching you. I'm sure she wants to live your life, experience new things, and I'm sure she's at peace because of you, he told her honestly and sincerely. She said that. He raised a brow in question and she clarified. Before my father took the hollow out of me, the magic was too much. My heart stopped and I saw her in the bayou with her friends. I told her I wanted to stay with her, but she said it wasn't my time yet. I blamed myself for her death, but she just gave me a smile like she was happy and told me, I'm at peace because of you, Hope. I thought it was my own subconscious trying to ease my guilt, but from everything that happened recently I can't help but believe that I wanted to see her so much that God gave me the opportunity to say goodbye. She finished. Naruto chuckled and nodded. Maybe, but you're wrong, she's still with you. He pointed to her heart. She's with you always and forever, just like your family promised, as is your dad, Hope. His blood runs through your veins, and every time you shift into your wolf, Your mother is with you, she gave you a gift, cherish it, princess. He smiled at the small smile on his tribride's face. You're amazing, you know, she said in some awe of how easily he accepted her flaws and mistakes, not by glossing over them, instead by acknowledging them and talking about it and reassuring her with sincerity and honesty. Naruto shrugged cockily. I know, I try my best. He laughed. Come on, let's get some sleep and we can talk more when we rested. He changed their positions. Hope was now lying in front of him with his arm wrapped loosely around her, kissed her cheek and whispered his promise in her ear sweetly. An eternity of tomorrows, princess. It was already 7 a.m. They spoke for a couple of hours now. They fell asleep with a content smile on their faces. Chapter 14. The sun was setting. The remaining light filtered through the windows directly onto Hope's image it created was picturesque. Too beautiful to was awake, his chakra replenished as he enjoyed the feeling of Hope's head lying on his chest, her hair sprayed across it. Beautiful, he thought. The silence in the room was welcoming, it brought a sense of peace. A peace that he hadn't often and enjoyed in his life in the elemental nations. Breaks in between missions were far and few, and wondered whether he would have enjoyed being a normal civilian more rather than a shinobi, but he banished the thought, laughing at how ridiculous it sounded. He heard Hope's breathing pick up as she woke from her sleep. From the look on her face he knew she felt at peace, or more than what she felt, opened up to him about her past and finally let her walls. Couldn't help the goofy smile that appeared on his face. It remained on his face when he heard a sleepy voice mumble, "What are you smiling at?" said his awakening lover. He chuckled a bit, thinking about his thoughts. "Nothing really, just how gorgeous you are and how lucky I am that I'm able to call you mine," he said sincerely. Hope put her chin on the blonde's chest and narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Her hair fell over her face. The smile the blonde had on his face was somewhat seemed perverted, but she let it be after him being so sweet and romantic. I'll believe that for now. A small smile graced her own face anyway, despite the suspicion in her tone. Pushing her hair from face, she resumed her position, laying on his chest. She heard his strong heart beat in his chest like a thump, like a drum. It was calming, soothing, and made her feel secure. Like before she met him, she was a lost ship traveling aimlessly through the open seas, but now she found her anchor. The sigh that fell from her lips was a content one. What time is it? She murmured with her eyes closed. She felt fingers running through her hair, massaging her scalp. It would surely lull her back to sleep. About 5 p.m. It's still Sunday, don't worry, he reassured his tribride lover. Wow, we slept the entire day. She asked, surprised. Usually she would be up and never slept the day away no matter how tired she was, but she couldn't help it whenever she slept in Naruto's room and felt his arms wrapped around her. It felt like she could sleep for a century. Yeah, that's because I'm an amazing cuddler, he proclaimed proudly. Yeah, you are, but you're also a big eater, and it's surprising you never. A rumbling growl cut her off mid-sentence on cue, as if emphasizing her point. Now that you mention it, I might be a bit hungry, princess. Hope now lifted herself off her boyfriend and laid on her side, and raised an eyebrow in the understatement of the century. Just a bit, she asked, and the Mikhailson smirk made its way into her face. Naruto rolled his eyes and humored his girlfriend. Yeah, a bit, but I'm in the mood for something that's not on the menu, he said suggestively, inching closer to Hope. He caged the girl between his arms and watched her trap her bottom lip between her teeth. Fucking sexy. All right, calm down, she loves teasing you, so relax and take charge like the alpha you are. He cheered himself on mentally. His eyes were no longer looking at the lip trapped between his girlfriend's teeth, instead they nearly drowning in those big blue beautiful eyes of his lover. And what would that be, say, combined with the sleep in her lowering her voice even further, it sounded husky, that no doubt awakened his libido. He nearly took the girl right there, but she was a virgin and he wouldn't pressure her into anything. His eyebrow twitched at the use of his title, and how sexily it fell from her lips. He held back a groan, and regained his composure, flashing his own foxy grin. You my tribride princess, was all he said before he devoured her lips in one swift move. His hands traveled down her body and landing on the back of her naked thighs, rubbing it gently, squeezing gently. Hope moaned in his mouth at the action. He used the opportunity to slip his tongue inside. The kiss was needy, hungry, and oh so passionate. Hope gripped his untamed blonde locks between her, breathing sped up as the kiss continued like that for another 2 minutes before he moved down, nibbling at her jaw and neck, leaving marks that would heal in a few minutes given her werewolf healing abilities. He listened to Hope moan quietly. He moved down to her collarbone, kissing softly. God, you're so beautiful, princess. He murmured between kisses. He sucked on her pulse point, long and hard to leave a nice-sized bruise. Mine. He's more animalistic side growled mentally. More baby. He lifted his head and reversed their positions easily. Hope was now straddling his lap and she definitely felt a very warm welcome between her lover's legs. Unknown to Naruto, Hope was ready to give herself completely to him. He was her lover and she couldn't help but echo her mother's words in her mind. Have a epic love. To her he was it, her epic love. Her own fairy tale. He was no prince, no angel, but a man that sent from a different world to become her own, and she was completely and irrevocably in love with. Tuned back into the sensations she was feeling, she felt his hands run up her back underneath the shirt she was wearing. She gripped his hair tightly as she grinded herself into his not so little, panted heavily. Knock. Fuck, muttered Naruto, stilling his movements, his head laid against Hope's very, very nice chest. He was about to start up again, but there was another knock on the door. I'm sorry, can we continue this once I kill whoever that is? He asked jokingly, but inside his mind a chibi and very perverted Naruto was preparing torture beyond what Ibiki would ever imagine. Hope managed to catch her breath and smiled at the frustration clear in his voice, never mind the frown on his face. She got off him and found her jeans before pulling it up. She looked back at her boyfriend's face. She couldn't help the giggle that came from her mouth as she watched the unbelievable look on her boyfriend's face. Damn it all to hell, he muttered and pulled out a sweatpants. His boner had subsided by the knock on the door. He knew it wasn't Alaric, so he assumed one of the students was at his door. Give me a second, then we can go get dinner together, all right? He asked Hope. It's okay, don't kill whoever's at the door, she said as she disappeared into the bathroom to use the shower. She is aroused and just as frustrated as her blonde boyfriend, but she hid it rather well. Naruto sighed and went to open the door. His bandages were still wrapped around his body, but he felt the skin knitting back together. He decided to change the bandages after swung the door open and looked at the person who decided to interrupt his sexy time with Hope. He furrowed his eyebrows at the boy. It was MG. He wondered absently what he could possibly want on a Sunday evening. Naruto, hello, I'm sorry for the boy said awkwardly. It was clear he heard what was happening in the room. Besides, from the scent that was lingering in the room, it was arousal. He smirked inwardly because he just now realized Hope was very, very into it. No worries, MG, how can I help you? He asked politely, try to ease the awkward tension in the doorway. Well, I want to apologize for this morning. Yeah, I didn't mean to attack you, it's just that I've been having trouble controlling myself, he admitted a bit lamely and angry at himself. Well, the reason is because my blood is much more tantalizing than humans, MG, but if you're having problems controlling yourself because you haven't accepted what you are yet, he said simply. He knew the boy had a problem with being a vampire. He watched the boy's face change from frustration to shock to confusion in a split second. Vampires truly are amazing creatures to be able to change emotions that quickly, he thought with an amused chuckle. How did you? MG's eyes widened when the bathroom door opened and Hope stepped out with a towel around her body. She looked up into his eyes and squealed. Naruto looked and realized the reason the boy was frozen was because of Hope. He rolled his eyes and pushed the boy out of the doorway and stepped outside with him. He was closing the door and said to Hope, "Don't give the boy ideas, Hope." Jokingly, the girl rolled her eyes and threw a shoe. It managed to close the door in time and laughed, turning back to the shocked vampire. MG. No answer. I wonder if vampires can go in catatonic shock. He questioned himself. He shook the boy. His eyes snapped back to Naruto. Yeah. You seem busy, so I'll go, but I wanted to ask if you'd be able to give me private lessons. Scratching his head lightly. Well, a group of us actually, he confirmed. Naruto watched him carefully. He was nervous, probably trying to make sure they prepared to protect the school if needed, because if last night was any indication, they needed to be ready. I'll talk to Rick about it, all right? He patted younger boy's shoulder and added before he went into his room, I trust you'll erase the image of Hope in nothing but a towel from your memory. He asked seriously. The boy nodded quickly and saluted. Yes, sir, he said, saluting. Naruto swallowed a laugh and nodded at the boy. Good man, he said before disappearing into his room. He stepped in and saw Hope dressed in her jean and one of his hoodies. He couldn't help but smile. I'll go have a shower, but help me with the bandages, please. Sure. She simply undid the bandage on his back. The skin was still raw. She trailed fingers near the hated that he got hurt so badly and sighed heavily. She asked softly, will it scar? Naruto shook his head slightly. No, I can feel my skin knitting back together. The only scars that I'll ever probably have is if I fight another demon or tailed beast, but the odds are slim of that ever happening. As Naruto said that, he couldn't help but feel as he cursed himself, but shook it off and went to water ran over his back. He hissed at the pain of water hitting the raw skin. Fuck, I can't for it to heal completely. He cursed under the shower. He dried himself and put on some clean underwear, and exited the bathroom with a towel around his waist. Hey, do you want to get dinner in town? Yeah, a burger and milkshake would be amazing. He nodded his head and put on a sweatpants. He handed the new roll of bandages over to Hope and she wordlessly helped him redress his wound, after he slipped a long-sleeved muscle t-shirt and some sneakers. What did MG need? Asked Hope as she watched from her position on the now made-up bed. She leaned against the pillows. He wanted to apologize for nearly attacking me last night after my fight with the Hydra and those men, he answered, lacing up his shoes. He what? Hope's eyes widened. You never told me that part. Naruto chuckled. It isn't a big deal. I snapped his neck before he managed to do anything. My blood is very appealing. He couldn't resist. He said the last, but somewhat cockily. He heard Hope scoff and laugh. Only you idiot. Hey. She ignored his offended tone and asked if that was all. Then he explained about MG wanting to find out whether they could get extra training. A few of their group, he assumed it was Hope, Caleb, Raphael, Jed, Josie and Lizzie, the self-proclaimed Avengers. And will you? She asked, moving from his spot over to her boyfriend. She whispered near his ear. I'll make it worth your while, she said seductively. He gasped and held his hand to his chest in a dramatic fashion. Well, I never. Hope Michelson propositioning a member of staff for a favor by offering some very questionable rewards. Thwack. He felt a hit to his head. Idiot, you're not a teacher, so it doesn't make it wrong or immoral. She scolded. He turned around and grabbed the girl's hips, putting her on his lap. Hey, I'll have you know I'm very respected by the headmaster of this school, but since I'm not a teacher, just a no-salary receiving instructor, what would my reward be? He asked, wiggling his eyebrows, with his hands wrapped around Hope's waist. I'll let you feel me up, she said, adopting a thinking pose. Okay, I'll bite. I'm assuming we're talking about the breast area, is that correct, Miss Michelson? You are say, she purred, kissing his jaw. Well, over or under the bra? He said, now looking at her breast. Oh pie, a chibi. Naruto was celebrating in his mind with a small nosebleed. Damn it, Ero Sennin really turned me into a pervert, he chided himself before getting his answer from his lover, who laughed. Yes, you may feel me up under my bra, she said as she said it. Naruto was making his way to her breasts, but she slapped his hands away. After you give my Avengers extra training sessions, he groaned. Ah, you vixen, you tricked me. He gasped. No, I didn't. You're just a idiot, babe. Come on, let's go get food. I'm hungry. Ha, woman can't live with and can't live without them, he muttered under his breath. What was that? Hope looked back and narrowed her eyes suspiciously. She heard what he said but wanted to see whether he would say it out. Loved teasing him. It was easy and very pleasurable for her. Naruto smiled innocently. Nothing, dear, nothing at all. It was later that evening. Naruto entered Alaric's office. The man was somewhat happy that his daughters came back from their trip with their stuck his head through the door and saw the man reading some ancient-looking book, probably trying to see where this vase comes from, but as far as Naruto was concerned, the keys seemed random with no significant meaning whatsoever. Rick, he called. The man looked up. The doorknob was still not fixed, so he didn't close the door lest he wanted to be stuck in the room. You're awake. I hope you're well rested, he asked as the blonde sat himself down on the chair opposite the desk. I am and full of energy, he answered contentedly. Well, maybe you could use that newfound energy and fix the doorknob. He emphasized his point by pointing toward the door. Naruto, on the other hand, scratched his head while laughing. I said I was sorry, he shrugged. No, you didn't. Rick narrowed his eyes. Are you sure? I mean, I'm sure I did, he said, trying to convince himself and Alaric. You didn't, insisted the older man. Naruto sighed. Bro, he said tiredly. Bro, He mocked. Naruto chuckled. I'm sorry, then I'll have someone come and fix it. But I came here for a different reason. What, you didn't just miss my company? He mocked and smirked. Mockery isn't the product of a strong mind, Dr. Saltzman. He teased, and no, I would very much prefer the company of a certain tribrid than that of an old man. Their laughter filled the room. Alaric stood from his seat and poured them drinks. He handed the drink to his blonde friend. I assume you want to talk about this triad. He sobered up and got serious. Naruto nodded. Yeah, I believe they're the ones watching this pit where the monsters are coming from. I mean, from what the guy told me, it seemed like they were in charge on sending away all those monsters we fought, but if their mission was to imprison or kill these creatures, why send them out now? He had been thinking about it. It didn't seem logical, but then again, evil is rarely logical and their goal was often spreading chaos. Under new management maybe. But we won't know more unless we investigate them, and because we have another key, monsters will be sure to come, so we have to fight a war on two sides. True. He paused before looking to his friend with a serious face. Meaning we have to split our efforts. I mean, as far as we're aware, the monsters came in ones, but since they got the first key, they've been coming out more than one at a time. Not to mention this triad wants to eliminate you because they think you're stopping them from reaching their end goal, whatever the hell it might be. He sipped his drink as the two of them sat in contemplative silence. Are you saying I should hide? He looked to his blonde friend with a frown on his face at the thought of hiding from these people. Naruto smirked and shook his head. Of course not. We both know you would never hide while people are in danger, Rick, but I will ask you to be careful when you're investigating this group, he said seriously. Rick nodded. He knew Naruto wasn't the type of guy that would run from a fight. Neither was he, and these people were looking for a fight. He didn't know what their goal was, but he was sure it wasn't anything good. And what will you do while I investigate the triad? Naruto gave the man a wide grin after he finished his drink, putting down the glass, and stood to his feet and moved toward the door. I'll be training our very own Avenger squad. The next morning at 5 a.m. we find Naruto standing in a baggy black shorts, his feet bare, covered in black. Medical upper body was bare as his back healed impressively quickly when he meditated later that night and gathered natural energy to expel the poison from his body, while creating antibodies at the same time. The tattoo on his back that he got when he was 15 in the elemental nations wasn't large, it was the size of a hand. The Uzumaki swirl he got tattooed was in memory of his clansman that died in the Third Ninja War. Not many knew why he had it, but the few that did understood. He mourned the loss of his mother's village and their clansmen. As far as he knew, he was the only living male descendant after Nagato had killed himself using the Rinne rebirth on the villagers who died in the man passed his dream of peace onto him with the hope that he would be the one who would guide the elemental to peace. His eyes were closed as he breathed in the early morning dew that covered the woods and lake. In a thin had removed the Hydra's ashes and remains from the battle area. He waited for his or Hope's Avengers. He sent her a message last night telling her their additional training would start at 5 a.m. no later. And now it was 10 minutes past 5 when he heard 8 sets of footsteps and 8 presences. He was confused. He thought it was only 7, but they must have gotten someone else. But then he realized that the 8th person was the golem he would recognize that Muddy sent anywhere. He sighed inwardly. He turned to face the group. They looked tired, each carrying a workout bag. He looked at each of their faces. Hope had a smile on her face and maybe a little bit of drool as she surveyed his chest. The boys looked ready. Josie had a small smile on her face too. She looked happy. But Lizzie had a scowl on her face as she muttered. Why do we have to be up at the crack of dawn anyway? Like, who even trains this early? She complained. He rolled his eyes internally at the girl, so very much like Sakura. Last night he added some chakra into a bracelet for them because their siphoned magic they would completely defenseless in a place without magic. Good morning to you too, he said to them. He reached at his pocket and pulled out the 2 bracelets. It was a simple band, but it had a charm attached with the Gemini sign. Here, he handed them over to them. These bracelets have my chakra imbued into it. It should give you enough juice to last for a month. With constant usage it will allow you to use your magic without depending on your surroundings. Never take them off, he said seriously. Chakra? Questioned Lizzie. It's kinda of like my magic and why I'm able to perform all those techniques, he explained simply. He looked to the rest of them and decided he was going to use the same exercise Kakashi used when he was a genin. The purpose was to build teamwork and trust between them. You all know why you're here and I won't waste time explaining. Over the past few months we have been facing a crisis as most of you know. He paused, taking in their expressions. This crisis has been mild up to now, but a day ago I faced a Hydra, a creature who was told to be mythical, and fuck, it was a difficult fight because it kept regenerating, and because of my inexperience fighting it I got hurt more than I would have if I had information on my enemy, but that's something we don't have the luxury of. His hands was behind his back. His face adopted a very serious demeanor. It was his battle face. I've been promised a reward by someone, and so I decided to pick my best students who show promise to form a defensive line of, if you will, when I'm not on campus or when Alaric is gone. It's up to you as protectors to keep the younger students safe, to look out for each other. He was cut off by Lizzie. All right, I get why everyone else is here and me because I'm awesome, but why is the Hobbit here? She turned to him. This isn't the Shire, Frodo. Naruto did his best to keep his laughter in and simply smiled at Elizabeth's question. He looked to the rest. They were confused as well. Hope was holding her hand in front of her mouth, trying to hold back her own laughter. Hey, he has every right to be here. Leave him alone, spoke the dark-skinned werewolf. I understand your concern, Elizabeth, but if he wants to learn how to fight I have no objections, but I will not be going easy on any of you, he said seriously, his eyes gazing longer at Landon so that he could understand he was serious. He saw the boy nod. All right, before we begin I've sealed off an area where we will be doing our exercise for today. He motioned for them to follow him. He walked into the woods that would give them more than enough coverage if they wanted to hide. Taking out the 2 bells from his pocket he showed them and tied around his neck. Your mission is to try and grab these bells from my neck. You have 2 hours, he said, and set a timer on the ground. He stared back at their faces. Are you serious? Questioned Raphael while Jed kept quiet. He knew it was a difficult task. Yeah, easy, right? Come at me with the intention to kill. He saw the scowl on Hope's face and the scared look on the twins. A tip: not every battle you fight will need a full frontal assault. Use your surrounding wisely. I'll close my eyes and count to 10, then we'll start. He closed his eyes. 1.2. 0.3 inches. Chapter 15. Naruto Pav. You know that moment where everything just fits. Like pieces of a puzzle seamlessly falling into place. This is one of those. The difficulties, drama, fights, and just life in general. I can't help but wonder whether it all was thrown in your way to lead you up to this exact moment. Serenity and calmness, 2 things I never thought I would feel in life, but both of those things seem to find me so easily whenever she's around. I came out of my thoughts when I watched the sleeping girl beside me wake up, opening up her light blue eyes, a lazy smile on spread across her lips. You're staring, it's rude, she mumbled sleepily. My face was resting on my palm as I admired the goddess before me, sheets draped high enough to cover her lower area but leaving her back completely exposed. I used my finger to trail her naked back and smiled back at my princess. It's called admiring. I paused, snapping my eyes back to her face, and I'd happily do it for the rest of eternity if I could. Amused soft laughter filled the room. I believe you said you could spend forever pleasing me last night, so which is it? Admiring or pleasing? She arched her perfectly manicured eyebrows, which I assume doesn't need grooming, or maybe she was just born with great of eyebrows. My mind flashed to Rock Lee's bushy brows. Oh gods, no, not everyone could be born with perfect eyebrows. I realized she was waiting for her answer and I shrugged easily. Why can't I do both? Now some of you may be confused at how we reached this point, so I'll rewind a bit to make it easier for you to understand how I became one of the luckiest men in the cosmos. Last started on Monday when Hope so easily persuaded me to give her Avengers extra training so they could be ready for any threats and new monsters. Flashback. 1.2. 0.3. I counted with my eyes closed. Them hiding under the cover the woods provided wouldn't help much. I would be able to sense them, however I decided to remain in the open to see what they would do. But like always there was N'Baka who thought they didn't need to hide or form any sort of plan, relying on brute strength to overpower their enemy. Sure enough, once I reached 10 I opened my eyes to the dark-skinned werewolf standing before me ready to attack. They weren't shinobi. I didn't expect them to fight like shinobi, but I did expect them to have the sense to try and work together, at least to overpower their opponent. After all, they had all been attending my regular classes. I would emphasize on teamwork, but I guess not everyone paid attention. I see you've decided to fight and not hide. I looked to the boy, who looked insulted that I even mentioned the word hide. Internally rolling my eyes, I shoved my hands in my pocket and decided to taunt him. Werewolves were aggressive, hot-tempered and rash, like I would have been if I hadn't had Kurama teach me patience and to think with both my heart and mind. Ha! I don't need to hide, he said, full of confidence. I smirked. Foolish, I thought with a scoff. Pretending to care about his so-called confidence, I sensed a few others close, one being Hope's. Her signature was different. Not like the witches, vampire or werewolves, but a mixture of all three. I sincerely hoped my princess would understand the reason for this exercise. I see, since you're all that mud, I expect you to provide me some challenge. I smiled mockingly to the werewolf. But then again, you're just a mud. Even if you call yourself a big bad alpha, you don't have the power to back it up, so being the generous guy the first I'll give you an advantage. I spoke while enjoying the sneer on his face. It was fun to be able to rile up your enemies, to find what made them tick so that you could exploit their weaknesses, and maybe my dislike for him played a part in that, but more than that, I didn't want to see any of them die because they thought fighting alone would be better. I'll beat you without removing my hands from my pockets, I said, now staring into the mutt's eyes. My smile widened further when I saw his eyes flash gold, indicating my taunting was successful. He shouted and launched a flurry of punches, which I dodged. Fighting was too straightforward. I could predict what came next. Left hook, right hook, uppercut, jab, jab and repeat. I sighed out loud. Predictable. I waited for him to lean in and jumped a bit with my hands still firmly in my pockets, and twisted and kicked him in his midsection, sending him flying against my foot. Connected, I felt two of his ribs crack underneath the power I put in. I walked over to the groaning wolf. Stay down. Two of your ribs are cracked, and even with your advanced healing it would take an hour or two to heal. I spoke loud enough for those in the area to hear me. I sensed two vampires coming my way. Before they reached me, I applied chakra to my feet and jumped up to the tree before me. I was wondering when you two would show up, I said before I watched them carefully and assessed their positions. Nice, well guarded, seems to be working together well. Let's see, I thought to myself as their assault started. I watched them come at me. Their speed was definitely impressive, but considering that they didn't use their speed to their advantage. Good more. My hands still in my pockets, and I dodged and danced around them. It was the basics of my taijutsu style: speed, flexibility and stamina. Instead of taunting them with words, I smiled throughout the fight, not even breathing heavily. They came at me, one from the back and front at vamp speed. I chuckled inwardly and performed a shunshin at the last minute and laughed when they ran into each other. I used their confusion to my advantage. Using Caleb's back as a springboard, I jumped up and wrapped my legs around MG, neck snapping before he realized. The boy went limp, and I saw the look in Caleb's eyes change. It was fully black now and veins protruding underneath his skin. Come now. I took my hands out of my pocket and sent a combination of attacks that left the vampire dazed before I snapped his neck easily. 3 down, 5 to go, I said, creating 2 shadow clones. I found Landon easily and knocked him out before he had a chance to react. I waited for Jed. He took my lessons to heart. He used his aggression to his advantage and did well, but not good enough. They needed to work together. The only two that did was MG and Caleb, but that was because they were both vampires. Sighing to myself, I waited for the twins and Hope to come out. I stood in the middle of the barrier, eyes closed, as I felt a tingling sensation in my head, probably a aneurysm spell. Opening my one eye, there was about a half hour left. Hope came at me attacking, while other two provided support reluctantly by the look on Lizzie's face. Princess, I've been waiting. I smiled. She didn't return it. It looked like she was serious. My face changed as well and nodded. Don't take me lightly, Naru, she said, as a warning, but I never did underestimate my opponents ever. When you do, you get sloppy, and when you get sloppy, you get hurt or people die. I never planned to, was all I said, and we were off. The fight lasted 15 minutes. I blocked her attacks. Her attack patterns changed. Not good enough though. I grabbed her foot before I could knock her out. I felt a force push below me. I looked back. The twins had a grin on their face. The force pushed hard enough into a tree that the impact was hard enough for the tree to break. I got up with a groan, cracked my neck, and looked to the 3 girls. Great plan, but you forgot something, was all I said before my clones knocked the 2 girls unconscious. All alone, darling, at last. I sprinted to Hope and fought a bit harder. I still held back some strength, but it was a good fight. She got a few punches in. trying to grab the bells but wasn't fast. Timer rang indicating time was sent. One last punch that I won't lie did rattle my jaw a bit, and it seemed to damage her hand as well. Well, sweetheart, remind me not to anger you, I said, rubbing my jaw opening and closing it, making saw it wasn't broken. Hope grunted and fell down on her butt. I sighed. I looked to the barrier and could see my younger students waiting for me. I created clones to carry the unconscious ones out of the woods and to the field where I'd be teaching them. I used the mystical palm technique I learned. More advanced medical jutsu was too far out of reach. I had good chakra control but not as good as Tsunade, so I stuck to the one that would be good enough for emergency treatment. While the others were out, I went through the usual meditation and Tai Chi training with my cute little was the only one awake to 30 minutes. The others woke up. I finished up with my students and told them to sit down. I realized they watched most of the fights. I see you're all awake. I looked to them, feeling better. I asked lightly as I stood in front them. Man, I feel like crap, muttered Lizzie, and the rest agreed with them. She looked to the younger students, surprise written all over her face. When did they get here? She nearly screeched. Well, they saw most of your fights, and well, I want to know whether any of you have figured out the purpose of that exercise. I asked, looking to the Avengers. Showing how weak we are, said Landon miserably. Hey, maybe you are, argued. They went on like this for a few minutes before I saw the contemplative look on Josie's face. I see you figured it out. Josie, mind sharing with the class? I asked, smiling lightly. Teamwork, she asked unsurely. I smiled to reassure her. You're right, teamwork and trust. Each of you asks to be trained, yet you fail to understand one very important thing. I look to my younger students now. Pedro, do you mind telling them why we fight in the first place? The boy nodded, stood up to his feet and looked at the older students. Hi, sensei. We fight to protect. We use of gifts and abilities to help, and we never think that we can fight better alone, because having the back of your comrade or friend is what makes us strong. I smiled. It was a bit different than I would say it, but it carried the same meaning. You're right, Pedro. Strength isn't determined about how big your muscles are, but who you fight for. The people that matter to you. I paused, looking straight at Raphael. You, Raphael, or an alpha, are supposed to be, but what is an alpha without his pack? I turned my gaze to MG and Caleb. Just because you are the two vampires does not mean you don't need the help of a wolf, for which you're not unkillable. I looked over to Landon. Your cowardice will put lives in danger. If you feel you cannot fight psychically, try and support them a different way. My gaze landed on the twins. Magic is amazing, but when you have a group mixed with vampires and wolves, magic should be used as a supportive role to hinder your enemy, which would make it easier for your frontliners to attack. But so that's all we good for? Asked Lizzie sadly and disappointed. No, Elizabeth, you need to have the trust of your entire team to support them from the back. Trust is earned, and you watching their backs means they trust you with their lives. It's an important role that I know the two of you are strong enough to handle. My eyes landed on Hope. Her blue eyes looked sad. There was a frown on her face too, but honestly she did well, but she needed to rally her team like a leader should, inspire, and she failed to do that. Hope Andrea Michelson. I paused, waiting for her to look up at me. You, my lovely princess, are a leader, but you failed to rally your team and formulate a plan. No battle is won by one person, remember that. I understand you don't trust easily, however, if you don't trust your teammates, your friends, then they can't put their trust in you as their leader. I spoke honestly. I saw her clench her jaw, but she nodded. It's clear to me that you have obviously failed in your objective, but this was your first try. I'm sure the Avengers sucked too when they started out. I joked, trying to ease the tension. There were a few kids and laughs. All right, tomorrow same time and same place. Hope, stay behind please, I said, and dismissed everyone else. When they disappeared, I pulled the girl into a tight hug. You okay, princess? I'm just. I waited patiently for her to continue. Why did you make me the leader? I can't be responsible for so many lives, she said nervously. I chuckled. She didn't even realize she has been doing it the entire time, protecting them. No, you were born to lead, princess, whether it's armies, a team, or family, and I know you'll do well, but first believe in yourself just like I believe in you, I said before pecking her lips. Now off you go to class before Alaric gives me an earful. I slapped her ass. She giggled and pushed me before running off. That's how it continued for the entire week. They learned to fight together. Of course, there were still issues here and there, but they did well together, much better than my first gen and team got. Even just thinking about it, we were lucky not to be killed by how mismatched our personalities were. Well, maybe I still acted like an idiot until I reached Chunin, then I let my real personality out piece by piece. I still wore the mask when I was around the villagers, but only a few knew the real me. It was now Saturday and apparently they were having a talent show. Despite the threat that was looming, Alaric felt he needed to try and keep some sense of normality throughout the entire ordeal, and I agreed it was important to not only concentrate on the negative, lest you want to fall down the rabbit hole or something like that, I guess. Turning down the hall, I felt like I stepped into the twilight zone. I heard a very chirpy laugh, a familiar laugh but also not familiar. I came to a stop as I stared at the source of the chirpy laughter. Hope was not a chirpy person, it was why I loved her. She had her moments, but she was different than most girls. That made her special to me, beside the obvious of her being the only one of her kind and my own personal unicorn. Now I know we spoke about being public, but I did not expect her to run over to me, plant a long kiss on my lips. After my initial confusion, I kissed back. After a minute or two, I pulled away and noticed the slightly glossy look in her eyes. Her hair was up in a ponytail, which I know she only wore if she was training. My eyes trailed down her face to the big smile on her lips, and I couldn't help but smile back at the girl, but I was distracted by something else. My eyes flashed to red as I looked at the bare skin. There was a glowing trail. Weird. I thought she pulled me out of my thoughts by pecking my cheek. I missed you, baby, she said, burying her face into my chest. I felt her breasts against me. Hee hee, oh pie. No, focus, Naruto. Okay, now I'm officially weirded out. My Hope was never cuddly unless we were alone in bed watching a movie I put on to intentionally scare her out of her wits. Are you feeling okay, princess? I asked, concerned. I noticed the glances from the other students in the hall, probably because of me and Hope being a couple, but ignored it in favor of making sure my princess wasn't sick or something, or worse, being taken over by someone else. Hope lifted her face from my chest and pouted. I damn near kissed it, but there were more important issues. Why wouldn't I be? I'm just very happy you're my boyfriend and I missed you. Didn't you miss me? Her pout changed into a frown. I panicked slightly at how quickly her moods changed. Of course not, but I just saw you less than a couple of hours ago, princess, I said, calming the tribrid, because she looked like she was going to cry. I discreetly moved her hair and confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't Hope. She would tease me, yes, but this wasn't her. Completely like something else was controlling her. I whispered a small lightning jutsu, enough to send a shock through her system. I watched the girl jolt and flinch at the sensation. Ouch! She held her neck and stared at me furiously. What the hell was that? I was about to answer when I saw a little worm-like thing fall from her ear on the ground. I looked down. Hope followed my gaze and honest to God squealed. I was going to laugh and tease her, but I picked up the creature and looked at it. It glowed like Hulk after being struck by gamma radiation. We have another monster? Asked Hope. I nodded absently. But we already have a. She stopped mid-sentence and I turned to her, narrowing my eyes, waiting for her to complete her sentence. Okay, I need you to remember I'm your girlfriend and you like me, and well, you get to touch my boobs, she said, smiling a bit. I sighed and pulled her hand to the hallway. Spill, princess, I said firmly. I wasn't angry, disappointed, maybe yes, because Hope knew that the monsters weren't coming one by one anymore. Last night Josie and I found a unicorn at the gate. He seemed harmless, and I couldn't really kill a unicorn. They're like every little girl's dream beside Josie, and I melted at the cuteness, and so we made an executive decision to keep it, she said quickly, scuffing her foot against the floor. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Sure, it seemed harmless, but if this unicorn was the reason for the so-called parasite, it was dangerous. Have you told Rick? I asked, even knowing the answer would be no. I looked at her face. She was biting her lip. I guess not. Hope, I know you're a smart woman. The monsters, creatures or whatever, are not coming one at a time anymore, and you let one inside the school because you thought it was cute. Frustration was seeping into my tone by the minute. I looked to Hope and sighed. I'll go talk to Rick and make sure no one goes to see this creature before we know what the fuck those worms are. The twins to help you. Also round everyone up who seems out of character. The little shock I provided you with is enough to kill the parasite apparently. I said before walking away. Yes, I might not be angry, but wasn't a game and I needed her to understand. I glanced and saw the downcast look on her face before she walked away. I took my phone out and sent her a quick text. Be careful and safe, please. I typed and pressed send. I sunshine to Rick's office and told him about it. I had no idea how to kill a unicorn, but I sure hoped Dorian would provide some insight. We were now standing at the place where the unicorn was being held. Sure, it looked harmless, but I looked at the worms on the ground. It seemed to be spawning a lot of them. Dorian said that these worms or parasites invade your hippocampus, then spreads its influence to your limbic system, which controls your emotions, which explains why Hope acted like she did earlier. I sighed looking at the monster. Okay, sure, it didn't look like a monster, but it was dangerous. Those parasites could destroy your mind or make you do things you normally wouldn't. Do you think this is all? I mean, for over a week we hadn't seen any other monsters besides this one. Rick paused and looked to me with concern and suspicion in his eyes. It's weird. Why send a unicorn? How could it possibly take the next key? My mind started working. If it was used to take the key, it would use someone with the knowledge, hence why it tried to use Hope, but Hope didn't know where Alaric hid it, only him, and I knew unless. Fuck Rick, when last did you see Landon? I looked to Man quickly. My fingers were already dialing Hope's number. I hoped she saw the golem, because if I was right, Landon was the only one who could apparently activate these keys. How? We didn't know, but I would bet my life on the fact that something else was at play here. I haven't, not today at least. You don't think? I would fucking bet on it. I started running to the school. Deal with the horse, Rick. I ran towards the school, realizing I could have used a shunshin. Too late. I made it to the hall where Hope was gathering the students. Hope, have you seen Landon? I asked, looking around to the students who were now coming off there, assuming that's what they would look like. I've never tried drugs myself, but hey. No, not since yesterday. What's wrong? She asked. Her eyes were wide. I looked to the corner. Raphael was rubbing his head, groaning. Hey Mutt, did you see your brother? I asked impatiently. Wait, what? He asked confusedly. Fuck, I don't have time for this. I cursed under my breath. Naru, what's going on? We made sure all the students who were affected were sorted. She looked to me, waiting for an answer. I looked around. I was now surrounded by those little Avengers, and Raphael was finally coming out of his drug-induced state. Something else is happening, and since no one seems to know where the golem is, I have to assume that the parasite somehow got to him. My face set into battle mode, as I formulated a strategy in my head. Last night, I have to assume that he's been gone for at least 12 hours, it being nearly 4 p.m. now. Okay, barrier around the students. I was worried because I didn't know whether or what we'd be facing. I want you to gather the witches. Josie and Lizzie set up a barrier around the school. No one comes inside or goes out of this building. I said to the 2 witches as they nodded frantically and scampered off. I looked to the remaining 5. Jet and Mud, I want you to gather 10 more wolves. I want them familiarized with the golem's scent, and I want you to search the woods. I looked to the vampires. You 2 go with them and hope you're with me. If you find Landon, send out a text or something if you encounter a monster. Quote. I breathed in deeply and stared in each of their eyes. Work together. I want everyone to have each other's backs. I do not want anyone to die. Is that clear? I asked sternly, my mouth set in a firm line to show I was dead serious. Whatever or whoever was coordinating this was smart and clearly not a monster like before. I just hoped it wasn't the necromancer, because we didn't have a weapon that could kill the fucking bastard yet. Let's go, Hope. I said, looking to her. She nodded and took my hand. We made it outside the school and into the backwoods. We were looking for an hour but haven't found anything yet. My steps were light, Hope's not so much, which reminds me I need to teach them the value of stealth. I sent her off to look in a different direction as I continued my route, with explicit instructions to wait and be careful if she found any creature. By now I'm sure the unicorn was dead, because Rick sounded very sad in his text message, probably depressed. He had to tell his daughter he killed a unicorn. I chuckled mentally. Gosh, she's going to be pissed off, because Josie really did love unicorns, not crazy mind-controlling ones, but the ones that shit rainbows out of the asses or something. I smelled something that stopped me from continuing my inner monologue. It smelled metallic. Blood. Looking for any signs of struggle, I saw more blood trails when I came upon a creature gorging on the blood of a black curly-haired boy. Landon, damn it. I sighed. I didn't like him, but of course I didn't want him to die. Her gaze snapped up when she smelled or heard me, but I was being quiet, so I'm pretty sure she smelled me. She dropped his now limp body to the ground and crouched ready to attack. Her wings, and by the feathers on her chest I assumed she was a harpy, but I trailed my eyes further down. To her feet she didn't have any claws like the description I've seen in books when they spoke of the creature. Her wings were large, her teeth were razor sharp, marred with the blood of the dead boy. If I were a pervert I would have stared at her naked chest, but I'm not a pervert. Well, maybe a pervert for hope, but that's besides the point here. And no, I'm not. What's the word for being racist when you're referring to a different species entirely? Never mind, I'm not that either, but her kind being sent to murder students of the school was something I would definitely not agree with. Focus, Naruto. I stood up straight, watching her carefully. Who are you and what do you want? I asked. Yes, I knew what she wanted, but maybe we could get new information. I'm Serena. I'm a siren sent to get what was lost. I tilted my head and nodded. All right, so it was clear she wanted the vase. Maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. Okay, so you don't have what was lost then? I tried. Her laughter was alluring, so was her voice. I could feel it trying to induce me into some kind of trance like a genjutsu, but I flared my chakra to shrug it off and I continued to watch her, wondering what the hell was so funny. Oh no, I have already found what was lost and it's gone now. I cursed and immediately attacked her. No use keeping her alive. We fought. She tried to claw me with her claws, but I created clones and dodged her attacks. From what I knew, sirens would lure men to do their bidding. They could read minds and shape shift. I'm guessing that's how Landon fell into her trap. We continued to fight. Using my left hand I created a Rasengan and shushined behind her, slamming the ball into her back. She flew against a tree and her wings broke her fall. I didn't allow her any time to rest. I punched and kicked her. I used one of my kunai to damage one of her wings so that she couldn't make it an aerial battle. What are you? She screeched. It was loud. Well, I'm assuming I pissed her off, but I didn't answer. Instead I continued my assault and flashed my demonic eyes. I flipped through signs. K's no Yaba. I muttered under my breath as the wind blade jutsu flew. She didn't see it coming. The wind split into tiny blades that cut into her body. Was now littered with cuts. She was bleeding heavily. I heard her before I saw her. I realized Hope was now standing there with Alaric and Raphael watching. The siren was kneeling on one knee as I stalked toward her. Her eyes flashed purple. I pitied her. She would die today. There was no helping that. Why can't I control you? She asked, frustrated. I flared my chakra once more, it sending out a pulse throughout the woods. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to die, I said quietly, loud enough for her to hear me. I took my kunai out and held it as I stepped in front. Her grabbing her had a smirk on her face, and for some reason it disturbed me. Before I knew it was no longer the face of the siren. Instead I was choking Hope, her light blue eyes staring back into my own red eyes. I was conflicted. Biting my lip I tried to undo the illusion, but it wasn't an illusion, and the one thing that told me it was a real transformation was the siren itself. Will you be able to kill the woman you love? She asked in Hope's voice, but no, it wasn't Hope. I didn't want to hesitate. She was playing games with me, trying to see whether I would fault. My eyes hardened, my voice changing slightly, echoing, anger pulsing through my veins. How dare she? My beast roared inside me. Yes, I agreed. How dare she take on the face of my lover and try to dissuade me? You are not her. My voice echoed in the quiet woods. My grip tightened as I squeezed her neck. There wasn't a flicker of doubt in my mind that she was my mate. Her energy signature was not Hope's, but it hurt that I had to kill something wearing my princess's face. I felt a pain in my stomach. I felt her sink her claws into me. I coughed some blood. I heard Hope's voice shout my name in anguish, surely thinking I would die, but I promised her an eternity of tomorrows. There's no way I would die before I fulfilled that promise, and I never go back on my word. My nails elongated into claws as it sunk into the creature's neck. Her eyes widened. She still had Hope's face. I used my kunai and pushed it through her heart. I felt her pulse weaken in my grip before she closed her eyes. I flashed my canines. And you'll never be her imposter. I let go as I felt her go limp in my grip, her hand out on my stomach. I felt the tissue knitting together. The only evidence of me being hurt was the hole in my t-shirt with my blood stains on it. I turned to the side and saw Alaric check over Landon's corpse, and I shook my head sadly. Hope was about to make her way over to me, but I couldn't look at her. Yes, my mind knew it wasn't her, and my beast agreed, but we agreed on one thing: the pain of killing something that wore her face was unbearable, even if it was an imposter. I turned away from her. I saw tears in her eyes, but I couldn't deal with that right now. What happened with the others? I asked Rick, wiping the remaining blood from my mouth. There was another one the wolves ran into. They managed to injure her by working together. I smiled a bit at that, and the man did too, but his face fell and he explained what happened next. But she flew away with the key. I nodded grimly. So that's. Before I could finish my sentence, I heard a gasp and looked to see Raphael watching Landon's body as it burst into flames. 2 keys gone. What the fuck? I whispered. Hope tried putting the fire out, but it didn't work. Soon after a moment, the flames died down and Landon came out of the ashes. Well then, I guess we know Landon is supernatural, said Alaric dumbly. I watched the faces of everyone. Raphael hugged his foster brother. A phoenix, whispered Alaric. I looked to my friend. His face was hilarious. I chuckled a bit and clapped the man's shoulder, getting his attention. I'm going to set the siren's body on fire, I said. My face still hadn't changed much, but the siren still wore Hope's face even in her death. Alaric looked at me concerned. Are you sure? If it's too hard, I can get rid of the body, he said softly. I shook my head. I needed to do this. She was an imposter, but it was my kill, so I would make sure to get rid of the body. Besides, I needed time to think. Okay, I'll take the rest back to school. I nodded my head in thanks. I heard Alaric speaking to Hope. She turned to look at me, but I couldn't look her in the eye until I knew the imposter was gone. I heard their footsteps move away from the scene. I stepped over to the siren, her blue eyes now dull. I pulled the kunai from her heart before I closed her eyes. A single tear slipped from my eye. Kaden Gukaku no Jutsu. It was on a smaller scale but hot enough to burn the body to ashes. I watched as the flames raged before it calmed down and the only remains were ashes. The wind picked up. It was getting later, the sky darkening, and the moon was rising. I sighed heavily as I turned my back and walked away. Later, after I showered and put on some sweatpants, I sat down on my bed trying to meditate, but I kept seeing Hope's eyes as the light drained from eyes snapped open as I heard the door open. You weren't at the talent show, she said softly. I heard the door click and her muttering of a spell. I didn't look up as I responded to her. I was tired. I didn't feel like it. I answered. I felt the bed dip, indicating she sat down. I closed my eyes once more, trying to calm my raging mind. I messed up today. You did, I answered. Are you still upset that I didn't tell you about the unicorn? Sighing. No, I'm not. Then why won't you look at me? She asked. Her voice broke slightly. I didn't answer, and I knew why I didn't want to look at her, because if I did, I would look into those light blue eyes I love so damn much, and I would have to relive one of the worst moments in my life. Because if this is still about the unicorn, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I thought it was harmless, so I made a mistake, and I'm sorry about that, but you can't not look at me, Naruto. I heard the sadness as her voice rose, getting louder with each word. I stood up, formed my position from the bed, my back facing her. It's not about the damn unicorn, Hope, I gritted out between my teeth. Then what? Look at me, she screamed, and I'm assumed she put a silencing spell on the room, because I'm sure even Alaric would have heard her voice. She was never loud unless she was screaming at me not to be a pervert. I turned and faced her. I felt vulnerable for the first time in a long time. I felt like I was that scared boy in the village trying to get away from the beatings of the villagers. Because every time I do look at you, Hope, I have to see my hand digging into your skin, my hand pushing a blade into your heart, and I have to watch as I kill the woman I love. Quote. A tear fell from my eye, as my voice shook at the words. Then I have to watch the life drain from your eyes, and I know it wasn't you, Hope. God knows I do. My mind and heart do, but there's a small piece of me that thinks, what if it was you? What if it was you that I killed? What if I killed the woman I love? What then? I said as I watched tears flow freely from her eyes as she cupped my cheeks. She took my right hand and placed it on her heart. Her voice was soft, tender, barely above a whisper. Feel that? I nodded as I felt her heart beat. I'm here. You would never do anything to hurt me. I know that, so stop torturing yourself, baby, because I'm here, she said, kissing me softly. It took a second before I kissed her back. She pulled back and spoke again. And I love you too, baby. I couldn't help the smile that spread on my face. I kissed her hard. My tongue invaded her mouth as my hands traveled down to her ass, squeezing it. She moaned into my mouth. I nipped it at her jaw, kissing down her jaw into her neck, biting down on the skin, sucking down on her pulse point. I felt her push herself into me, feeling my growing erection. God, I wanted her so badly, but I needed her to be ready. I want you completely, Naruto, she husked, and I complied. Before I knew it, our clothes were creating a pile on the floor, she laying naked before me, and I stared. Perfect, so perfect. I trailed kisses down her neck to her collarbone. She squirmed beneath me, more, she panted. I chuckled as I took her nipple into my mouth, sucking on it hard, and used my other hand to squeeze her breast, rolling the nipple between my fingers. So impatient, princess, I murmured, alternating between both breasts, giving them equal attention. My mouth trailed down her defined stomach. I moved my attention to kiss her inner thighs as I teased her. Baby, stop teasing me. I chuckled and dived happily into her pussy, teasing her engorged clit. I shoved my tongue between her folds, enjoying her juice that spilled. Her moans got louder, and thank God she put up those silent spells. I want you to ta. Me, baby. I nodded. I was hard and ready to enter her. I concentrated chakra into my finger and created an anti-pregnancy seal on her abdomen. She felt the tingle and questioned what that was. Anti-pregnancy seal? I don't want little mini-me's running around so soon, I said easily, and started kissing her, and I lined my dick up to her slit. I teased her folds with the tip as felt a slap to my back, indicating to hurry up. Relax, it's going to hurt, but I'll go slow, okay? I assured my princess softly as I entered her slowly. She felt warm, wet, and ready for me. I wanted to slam into her, but it was her first time, so I needed to go slow. I saw her face contort into a grimace as she adjusted to my 8 inches. It was a lot to take. I devoured her lips and thrust quickly, tearing her hymen in one swift move. I saw the tears spring from her eyes as I kissed them away and stayed still, giving her time. You okay, baby? I asked softly. She nodded slightly. Yes, you can move now. I didn't even think twice as I pulled myself out to the tip before I slid in slowly. The slow pace was getting to me. I hadn't had sex in so long, since before the war, but feeling hopes insides grip me so tightly must have been the best feeling ever. I felt her nails dig into my back as she moaned near my ear, urging me to move faster and harder. I put my face into her neck as I thrust it in harder and faster. A thin sheen of sweat covered our bodies as I pulled Hope's body up. Her arms went around my neck. She was sitting on me as I fucked her tight pussy. My hands controlled her movements. She threw her head back. I could feel her clench down on my dick, indicating she was nearly there, and so was I. Her orgasm came quick. I felt her juices rushing against my dick as I continued to thrust and slowed down once the sperm spilled from my dick, painting her insides white. She kissed my lips softly. That was amazing, baby, she said with a fully satisfied smile. I, on the other hand, could feel my dick twitch, indicating I could go again. I smirked into the kiss. Another round, princess? She laughed and hit me. You ready again? So soon? Well, they don't call me the #1 unpredictable ninja for nothing. I smirked and changed our positions. I heard her laugh, and well, it's safe to say we didn't stop till the early hours of the morning. Flashback over. So yeah, I was enjoying the view right now, and well, maybe I just had a perverted look on my face and Hope caught me. She narrowed her eyes and looked underneath the covers. And gasped. Again. She asked, eyes wide. I scratched my head sheepishly and shrugged. #1 unpredictable ninja. Well, I didn't get laid, but I did get a view of an amazing ass. Chapter 16. Naruto Pav. I heard a saying somewhere. It was something I completely agreed with, and even more than anything, I see it every day when I looked into her eyes. I can't remember where I heard the quote, but it was probably from one of those cheesy rom-coms Hope swears she hates because she's not a girly girl. That's a lie, because no matter how many times she tells me she lets me watch it because I didn't have these types of movies in my dimension. Flimsy excuse, but I let it slide, and maybe sometimes I rather enjoy it, but I would never admit it out loud because then she would say, I told you so, not feeling up to that at all. But I digress. The saying or quote I heard was simple. I see my future in your eyes. See, simple, easy to remember, and very hard to find in a person, but when I look into those blue eyes of hers, I truly do see my future, our future. But again, I wouldn't say it directly to her because she would accuse me of secretly enjoying her rom-coms. A week had passed with no particular movement from the triad nor any monsters. It's like the saying goes, the calm before the storm. Well, I don't agree with that, because in my world there were always little things that lead up to a storm, never calm. Never quiet, so yes, I was a bit on edge, not noticeably so, but when I spoke to Rick or Hope, they could sense my unease. They asked me about it numerous times, but I shrugged off their concern and simply said I was waiting for the next key. It was now Friday and I needed to get to the Fox's realm, to get more sealing supplies. To be perfectly honest with you, I had no idea how they managed to accrue all these supplies. Whenever I would ask, Ren would give me a sly look, one that meant the little fox was up to no good, but then again, when was he ever up to any good? I'm strolling through the empty hallways of the school. Students had classes, it was nearing lunch, and I knew Hope would go to the cafeteria to hang out with the so-called Super Squad. The name was lame, I said that, and I got a smack to the head for being rude, so I made sure to never mention the lame name again. Finally making my way into the cafeteria, I waved at the cooks. They made amazing food and I liked them because they could make ramen, not as good as back in my old world, but it would do for a substitute. I sat at the table the Super Squad would occupy. Even saying the name in my head made me roll my eyes. I wished they chose something else or badass like Legends of Tomorrow. Okay, well, that was used, but still, I mean, Hope and the twins were literally born from people who were named in their history of the school, so why not, I thought with a shrug. I came out of my thoughts when I heard a bell ring indicating it was lunch. I didn't have to wait long to see students filling up the cafeteria, each in the respective groups. I watched the entrance to the cafeteria waiting for my princess to enter, and when she did, a smile appeared on my face. I watched her walk towards me, her hair bouncing as she walked. God, I sound like a girl. And I mean that in the nicest way possible, but she was a gorgeous woman. No, saw me and I saw her smile with twinkle in her eyes. Her eye color often changed shades for different moods, and right now she seemed happy. I just hoped she wouldn't be too upset that I'd be gone for a couple of hours, most likely till 5 or something, depending on the foxes. They always seem to want to check in and mess around. Hey, she hopped over and sat down next to me, giving me a peck on my lips. Princess, I smiled and turned to the rest of the group that sat down. I squinted my eyes when I looked between Josie and Lizzie. They seemed to be having some drama. I gestured with my eyes and Hope's smile fell slightly and whispered near my ear. They found out something their parents had been hiding for a while, so it's causing some tension between them. I nodded. I knew what she was talking about and I wanted to speak to them before I left. So not that I'm not happy you're here, because you usually have a class to teach. Did something happen, a new monster? She asked the last part quickly. I shook my head and wrapped an arm around her waist. What, I can't see my beautiful princess for lunch? I asked sarcastically. She rolled her eyes at me and raised her eyebrow. Spill Naru, a tone that left no room for argument. I do love it when she takes control, especially in the mind. Was drifting and she snapped her fingers with a knowing smile on her face, muttered under her breath. Pervert. I shrugged, not really denying the statement either, but I was only a pervert for her. Only for you, I quipped, but yes, I'm here because I'm going to be gone for a couple of hours, heading off to see some foxes. I paused. Everyone else was having their own conversations. Alaric has gone off as well, digging more into our friends, and he won't be available on his cell for a few hours either, I said slowly, now gaining the attention of the twins. What? They asked together and scoffed. I rolled my eyes and spoke to them. I want to speak to the two of you before I leave, I said firmly. Okay, but you're not telling me this because just so I should know. She paused. Does it have to do why you've been on edge lately? Hope asked softly, and squeezed my hand and nodded silently. Hopefully it's nothing, but I want you to be careful. I gave her a long kiss and whispered near her ear that I loved her before I walked away. It was like something was telling, no, urging me to tell her about the quote I thought about earlier today. You know, the one I said I would never say out loud. Well, for some reason I didn't care if she teased me about it, I just needed to say it. I turned back and cupped both her cheeks gently, making sure our eyes stayed connected, and whispered, I see my future in your eyes, Hope, never forget that. With a kiss to her forehead, I watched her cheeks get red as her eyes widened in satisfaction as a smirk spread across her lips. I knew you liked it, she proclaimed loudly. Loud enough for people to look at her. I smiled and winked at her. I gestured for the twins to follow me into the hallway. We walked until we got to an empty classroom. I know why the two of you are upset at your dad, I simply said. You knew? Asked Josie as her eyes filled with tears. And you didn't tell us? Lizzie had a betrayed look on her face. I sighed heavily. I disagreed with not telling you because it's your future, but you both know that your father and mother has done and is still doing everything in their power to stop it from being your fate. I said sincerely. Their jaws were clenched, probably wanting to pound my ass right about now, but they also realized it was the truth. Their parents had been working relentlessly to find a solution to the curse. The two of you are sisters and this thing is tearing you apart. I said, looking between the two of them. Their eyes were planted on the ground. And I don't want that to happen, so make up, because it's neither of your faults, it's your fucking coven, and trust me, if I find the asshole that started this curse, he'll wish he'd never been born. The last part was out of anger because I love these girls like sisters. They knew of my past, accepted me entirely without any judgment. Okay, maybe there was a little judgment from Lizzie, well, not bad, but she was appalled that I didn't show her my tails. Always the drama queen, I thought with a dry chuckle. I'm going to be gone for a few hours, so be good and you know I won't let anything happen to the two of you. Gathering them into a hug, I kissed both their heads. Look after each other and be safe, all right? I said softly, releasing them from my embrace. You making it sound like we'll find another monster while you're not here, said Lizzie. I always knew she was way too perceptive. I'm sure the golem will find a way to bring trouble. I smirked without any amusement. They nodded, but Lizzie outright laughed at the comment. He's a phoenix, you know, said Josie in his defense. Oh, I know he won't shut up about it, but to me it's like he came out of the flames of Mordor, so he'll always be the lost hobbit from the Shire. Lizzie was losing it. Tears sprang from her eyes as she laughed, and Josie shook her head, but I could see the amused smile on her lips. Ya nay, I said before disappearing in a shunshin. Hopes Pav. Naruto just left with Josie and Lizzie. I hoped he could get through them because I haven't been able to, and we've been getting along really well over the last couple of weeks, in and out of training, so everything was going well. I finally managed to stop feeling all the guilt that used to weigh me down. Okay, maybe not all of it, but I felt lighter than I have in years, and I'd like to give all the credit to Naruto, but he would just roll his eyes and say he couldn't make me do something I didn't want to. So how long have you and Naruto been dating, Hope? I looked to my side and saw Caleb was the one asking the question. I gave the boy a small smile and mentally calculated how long, but it's been a few months now, give or take, maybe about 5 months. Wow, 5 months already. It seemed fast. I looked to Caleb and answered. 5 months now. He nodded. Though it passed so quickly, the vampire nodded along with MG. The only one who had a scowl on his face was Landon. Yeah, probably because we're fighting monsters left and right, joked MG, and I laughed along. Yeah, maybe. We were joined by Lizzie and Josie. They seemed better, and even sitting next to each other now, so definitely progress. What are we talking about? Asked Lizzie as she nibbled on her food. Raphael answered her. Hope and Naruto. I rolled my eyes and nodded. I'm still pissed that you kept it a secret. Well, I can understand, Hope, but why did he, especially from me and Joe? She said, wondering. I shrugged. I really didn't know, but I hadn't even known that they were so close in the beginning of our relationship. Why would he tell you? Because he's friends with your dad. Asked Landon. Lizzie rolled her eyes, and I'm sure if she did it any harder it would be stuck in her herd. Yeah, there's that, but also because Joe and I see him as an older brother, a very cool older brother that would give you some liquor when you had a very shit day even though you're not legal. She blurted. My eyes narrowed. I knew Naruto kept alcohol in his room because I always saw him with a glass of whiskey when we're in his room. That idiot. I muttered under my breath. No one heard except for the vampires, but they laughed, and Caleb looked like he even approved even more. Though they had a rocky start, they became buddies, not bros like he was with Alaric, but I don't think anyone would be able to become like the two of them. Even I got unreasonably jealous sometimes. Isn't he like 18 or something, or is it like a regular thing that he just has alcohol in his room? Said Landon, and I was confused because I missed out on something. I sighed loudly and looked to Lizzie, who seemed to feeling the same way, irritated by Landon at his questioning. Yeah, something about being old enough to kill, old enough to drink, and old enough to have sex. Something about his rules back home where he's from, she said with a wave of her hand, and MG took that as his cue to change the subject, for which I was grateful because I didn't feel like talking about my boyfriend when he wasn't here and I missed him already. Oh god, I sound like a lovesick teenager. Huh. I looked to Lizzie, wiggling her eyebrows. Well, are you going to leave us hanging? Now I was confused again. I don't know what you're talking about, Lizzie. I said in a confused tone. I truly didn't. I was stuck in my thoughts. I watched the girl sigh dramatically. I'm asking whether you and Naruto did the nasty already. I probably turned 50 shades of red right then. The rest clearly knew that meant, and Lizzie laughed while Josie offered a sympathetic smile, apologizing for her sister. The bell rang to indicate the end of lunch before I could answer, and to be honest, I really didn't want to answer that question. Oh, look at that, lunch is over, I said as I scrambled to get my stuff. Come on, Hope, don't be a prude, chided Lizzie, amused by my hasty retreat. Later, guys, I said, running off to my next class. It was Friday, so class passed pretty quick. Before I knew it, it was nearing 3 p.m. I got a text message in the group. It was a panicked one from Raphael asking whether we'd seen Landon. I haven't seen him since lunch, and I responded like that. Lizzie, haven't seen the Hobbit since lunch. Hope, me neither. Caleb, Dido. Okay, everyone was giving the same responses. Lunch was a few hours ago. Where could he have possibly wandered off to? Raphael. He left me a voicemail, but it sounds weird. Said he was leaving the school and it wasn't the place for him. Okay, now I'm worried because ever since he got here he's been trying prove or find some place to belong, so him upping and leaving out of nowhere doesn't sound like Landon at all. I hoped he was okay, but apparently being a phoenix gave him newfound confidence, and that was nice for him but terrible for everyone else. I got out of class and told the rest to meet in the common room. Alright, so did he take his clothes, Raph? I asked, looking to the panicking werewolf. Nah, he didn't. He just up and left or disappeared. It's weird, right? And cue Lizzie exact moment to be snarky. It was amusing, but not in this situation, especially since he's the only one who could activate these keys as far as we are concerned. Maybe he went back to the Shire, commented the girl while looking at her nails. Josie smacked her arm. Not now, Lizzie. She looked to the rest of us. I sighed. I have to call Dr. Saltzman and Naruto, I said, taking out my phone, dialing their numbers, but both of it went to voicemail. No answer, damn it. I sighed. I know Naruto told me Alaric wouldn't be available because he was investigating Triad, but I at least hoped Naruto would be. We need to find Landon and not worry about your boyfriend right now, Hope. He said. I narrowed my eyes but didn't comment on his tone since he was worried about his brother. Okay, so we saw him a couple of hours ago. I looked to MG. Raph, play the voicemail for MG and listen to see whether you find anything out of place, I said slowly. It was the only lead we had, might as well make use of it. We listened to the voicemail twice. MG heard a car or engine, like he was driving somewhere, maybe a bus, or he caught a bus to wherever. Maybe he left by himself or couldn't take seeing his crush with someone else, says Lizzie unhelpfully. I gave her a look that basically said, not helping Lizzie, because Raphael is freaking out, but I can't help but think about where we followed a monster too. When he carried the vase, it was some warehouse outside of town. Of course we managed to track him down, but Naruto called Alaric to say he needed to come back ASAP, so we couldn't investigate further. Triad. My thoughts are now working overtime, because as much as I don't want to believe Landon's been kidnapped and he just left by himself, it is a valid possibility to consider. I looked to the rest of the group and made my decision. It sounds like he was in a vehicle. It didn't sound like a bus though, say MG as he gives Raphael's phone back, and Caleb nods his head in agreement. Okay, so let's get some weapons and move out. I want to be prepared for anything. God, Naruto is going to kill me. Josie gives me a, really? Look, we can't get hold of Dr. Saltzman nor Naruto, but if something bad has happened, I don't want to just sit here and do nothing. However, if it's too dangerous, we wait for word from Dr. Saltzman, all right? I asked everyone. I could see their nods as they hopped off to gather their gear. We met in the hallway. Everyone looked ready. Do we even know where we going? Asked Josie. I nodded. If he has been kidnapped, there's a group that's basically working with the monsters. I don't know much about them because your dad is currently investigating, but we did manage to find a warehouse. The rest nodded along. I opened the doors and was about to take a step before I felt a piece of metal roughly shoved at me. I looked to the metal. It was a gun, a very large gun attached to a man in black clothing and wore a sneer on his face. Well, look who we have here, he said to the rest. And where do you think you're going? He asked somewhat casually, like he wasn't holding a fucking gun to a teenager. Out, but I guess not anymore. I shrugged helplessly. We were surrounded by men and women with weapons. I tried muttering a spell, but nothing happened, and the man laughed. Oh no, little darling, you abominations have no magic, feigning remorse. I narrowed my eyes before I could tell Caleb and MG to stop. They rushed out into the sunlight but turned back when they felt the burn to their skin. Oh yeah, no magic means no daylight rings. I watched him as he spoke and asked the question I'm nearly 100% sure I already had the answer to. Who are you and what do you want? My confidence was waning. I'm sure I could take on two of them, but Lizzie and Josie would get hurt and not heal. The vampires would do okay, but considering that their daylight rings were out of commission, they wouldn't be able to fight while the sun was still up. Who we are? Triad, but what we want is none of your concern, he said, shoving the gun even more against my chest. Damn it, well, we're fucked. My mind so unhelpfully quipped. I nodded as I stared back at the twins. They were afraid, and it showed on their faces. So much for a road trip, quipped Lizzie before we were roughly shoved in and I looked around. The school was crawling with these people. What are we going to do? Whispered Josie to me and Lizzie. I looked at her because there wasn't anything we could do without a lot of people dying or getting hurt. I'm not sure there's anything we can do, I replied. Damn it, Naruto, you better be on your way back, was my last thought before the world faded to black. Naruto Pav. I was finishing up getting all the sealing supplies I needed to create a new barrier around the school. It was nearly 5. I reversed summoned myself to the school. In the woods, walking to the tree line, I saw black vans standing near the grounds. I used my heightened hearing to hear any movement. I watched 2 men stand with guns near the entrance. Fuck, I thought. I didn't expect them to try again. I dialed Alaric number and I climbed in one of the trees high enough to get a good vantage. I could even speak. Rick spoke. Naruto, the Triad has infiltrated the school. They haven't started harming students yet from what Hope said, but it won't be for long. What are they looking for? I asked hurriedly as I surveyed my surroundings. The last key maybe. Hope said Landon was missing, so I can assume they needed him for something. He answered my question. Damn it, I calmed myself down knowing nothing would work if I got angry at these fuckers. Are the Hope and the twins safe? I asked, not even masking my concern because I knew Rick would understand my worry. I think they are, but apparently they can't use magic and the twins don't have any more of your chakra either. I cursed underneath my breath. I knew I forgot something. Alright then, I'll try and get in carefully and see the situation for myself, I said. I was about to end the call when I heard Alaric speak. I'm on my way back. I'll be there in 30. Keep them safe please, he said the last bit pleadingly. I sighed. With my life, I responded before I ended the call. I did some inventory on the tools I had with me. I only had about 6 kunai and the rest of were ink and fuinjutsu supplies. I needed to get close without being seen. My Segakur no Jutsu, I muttered under my breath. This jutsu would allow me to camouflage myself and blend into my surroundings. I created one shadow clone and told him to use the same jutsu. You know what to do, I said quietly. My clone nodded and we were off. I sneaked and managed to sneak up behind the unaware man. I put my hand over his mouth and used my kunai to stab him in the back of his neck. I felt his body go limp in my grip. I watched as my clone did the same to his partner. I took the kunai out of his neck and dragged him into the van, breaking their guns in the process. I created 9 more clones. I want you to check the surrounding areas. Kill them quick and quietly. They nodded and ran off to do their job. I entered the school. It was quiet. I saw Emma sitting with the younger students. They were being watched by 2 people. I watched their expressions. They looked scared, but I saw Pedro's face. It had the face of a warrior. He was holding 2 of the younger girls in his arms, muttering reassurances. I smiled a bit, knowing the boy realized he needed to be calm. Realizing I couldn't let the students get shot, but the room they were in only had one exit and entrance. I walked near Emma. She was shaking, scared for the students. I spoke next to her ear in a whisper. It's me, Naruto. Don't say anything, I said quickly. She just flinched and subtly nodded her head. Okay, are there only these 2 here? I asked, looking around. There were about 30 students. It's clear that these people would shoot first and ask questions. Nodded once more. I need you to stay calm. I'm going to create a distraction. I want you to stay absolutely still and tell the kids to close their eyes when they hear a noise. She knew from my tone of voice that I wasn't going to let them walk out here. Nodded once more. I knocked on the door as I watched one of the men motion to the other one to check it out as he kept watching the children with a gun pointing to them. The one walked to the door and opened it. I slipped out but continued the knocking as he stepped out to the empty hallway. I grabbed him, closed his mouth and snapped his neck quickly. The other one spoke. Jenkins, come on man, stop playing around, he said. I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. I waited. I looked to the students. Their eyes were closed. Good, I thought as I waited for the man to near me. As he did, I knocked the gun from his hand, letting it drop onto the floor with a thud. I grabbed his neck and snapped it with a sickening crack resounded in the room. As his body fell to the ground, I sealed his body and his partner's body up in a scroll and put it over my back. You can open your eyes now, I said softly. I saw the sadness in Emma's eyes. Pedro ran over and hugged me. Don't worry, you're safe now. I placated the boy and held tighter. I felt bad for killing them in such a way, but these students were important to me. I sighed heavily as I knelt down to face Pedro and wiped his. Was trying so hard to be strong for his friends. I need you to stay here. I'm going to put a seal around this room. No one will be able to enter except me, all right? Once everything is over, I'll release them and you can come out, I said loud enough for them to hear. I was about to leave when I heard a gunshot. It came from Alaric's office. Be careful, Naruto, said Emma before I applied the camouflage jutsu again. My heart was beating fast. I hoped Hope and the twins were all right. My clones dispelled and I got their memories back. They made sure the perimeter was secure. I passed the grand hall and watched as the students were sorting artifacts from the school as they were being watched by 6 guys with guns. Nothing's ever easy, I thought to myself. I saw MG and Caleb watching carefully, probably looking for a way to get rid of these people. I remained on my spot as I looked for a way to get rid of these people without letting anyone get hurt. MG, Caleb, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I watched as their eyes widened, looking around. Stop looking around like idiots, I heard the twin apologies under the breath. Okay, I want you to recruit some vampires and use your speed and strength to carry as much students as you can. When I give you the signal, I saw them nod and make the way subtly to the other vampires in the room and gave them the plan. The vampires nodded. All ready for you, Captain, said MG. I'm sure he was referring to Captain Rogers from the Avengers. I chuckled under my breath. Sure, okay, and go, I said. The rest happened quickly. I ran through the 6 men quickly while the vampires were taking the students to safety. I got shot in my arm, but it didn't feel like the bullet I felt when I killed the others. When I was done, I saw the 6 bodies litter the floor, the necks mangled. I looked to MG as he watched me with wide eyes. I shrugged. My camouflage was undone since that bullet hit my arm. I sealed all the bodies. Where are Hope and the twins, Milton? I asked as I took my t-shirt off. I could feel the bullet in my arm and dug it out with my nails and hissed. It wasn't a regular bullet either. I watched my skin try to heal, but not as fast as I'd like. They're in the transitioning cellar. He looked to my arm. Are you all right, Cap? I nodded and stopped the bleeding with a piece of my shirt. Fine. I gritted my teeth. I unrolled my other scroll and took out my coat I wore when I was fighting Madara. It was the only thing I had on me without having to go to my room for other clothing. I put on the complete white coat. The collar was high, the edges were trimmed red, and there was kanji on the back for fox. It read, Kitsune. I added the scroll onto my back once more. Where's the leader? The boy looked at my coat with glee but came to his senses. He's down there too with 2 other men. I nodded. Okay, I needed to get to them. I don't know who was shot, but I needed to get down there. All right, keep the rest safe. The perimeter has already been dealt with, I said, vanishing in a red blur. I neared the transitioning cellar. I could hear Hope's voice and another unknown male. I'm assuming he's the leader. Help her, she's dying, Hope screamed. Well, no, how about you tell me where the next artifact is, unless you want to be next. I clenched my jaw tightly as I listened to the man speak. I had 3 kunai on me. I heard footsteps near me. I grabbed the guy and snapped his neck without a second thought and laid his body carefully down. I sensed another presence as I turned. I was shot twice in my chest. I gritted my teeth. It fucking hurt. Before the man get let off another volley of shots, his neck was bleeding as I threw the kunai directly into his jugular. His eyes were wide as he dropped to his knees. I walked over, taking out the kunai. You fucked with the wrong school. I'm assuming he attempted to notify the leader, but he coughed blood. I looked to my chest and watched the bullet create a pattern like veins, poison. I questioned myself as removed the bullets, but I felt weaker, not completely, but I could feel my chakra network combat the spread. It would take a few hours before it left my system completely. Sealing up their corpses quickly, I moved to where I heard the voices. The man was now pointing his handgun at Hope and my blood boiled. I saw Lizzie holding Josie's hand as she looked pale. Hey! I got the mont's attention. Hope's eyes went wide as she shook her head at me. I paid attention to the short man. He was well built, but the sneer on his face reminded me a little too much of Gato when I had that mission to wave. Who are you? And how did you get past the others? I raised my eyebrow as I held two kunai in my hands and tilted my head to the question. How do you think? I asked sarcastically. The man looked angry. He raised his gun and aimed to shoot me, but I appeared behind him, sliding the kunai through the flesh in his neck. I was angry because he threatened my mate, and my voice held a demonic quality as I spoke. I'll see you in hell, you fucker, I said, removing the kunai as he dropped to the ground, losing blood by the leader. His eyes dropped as his chest heaved one last breath. I sighed and put his body in the scroll before turning to Hope and the twins. You were shot, said Hope. I grimaced but didn't let it show on my face. My face was blank. I'm fine, I waved off her concern. She looked to me, but I turned my gaze to Josie and ripped the gate off the cell. Hope, give her your blood, I said before I felt a pain near my chest. The bleeding started up again. Fuck, I breathed heavily, leaning up against the wall trying to expel the poison. Hope cut her hand and let Josie drink her blood. After a few seconds, Josie's bleeding stopped and Hope came near me. Come on, you two, baby. You're not healing. I shook my head as I opened my eyes. Stop being stubborn. Those bullets are made from mud of Malivore. Come on, please, she pleaded with tears in her eyes. I'll be fine. Your blood won't work, Hope, I said honestly. She looked confused. Your blood or vampire blood causes havoc in my system, so relax, I won't die. I cracked a smile. I heard footsteps and shoved her behind me, but I saw Alaric's face and he looked relieved. We have to get Landon, said Hope. I looked to her. He was taken and they plan to raise Malivore or something, so we need to stop it. I nodded. Rick, can you handle this? Everyone who was a threat is gone. I'll release the seal I used to keep the younger students safe. I interlocked my fingers and whispered, Kai. No, Hope shouted. I looked to her confused. Excuse me. No, you were shot multiple times and not healing. You can't go get Landon. I'll go, but you'll stay here and recover, she said firmly. I looked to her, raising an eyebrow in amusement. If she ever thought I would let her go off on her own without backup. I find you taking charge very sexy, I said, wiggling my eyebrows. So not the time, muttered Alaric as he helped the twins. But I'm not letting you go alone, so deal with it and I'll heal in a few hours. Besides, I'm still capable of fighting, no worries. I gave her a cheeky thumbs up with a grin. I didn't give her time to respond. Let's go, she nodded reluctantly and followed me to the car. So where are we going? I asked as I sat in the passenger seat, concentrating my chakra to expel the poison. It was a slow process, but it was working. A warehouse Alaric tracked them to after when we had to go after Landon the second time, she said, starting the car. I sighed and looked out the window. He keeps on disappearing. Fucking Gollum hunting his precious down, I muttered softly. Hope laughed and shook her head as she exited the gates. We arrived at the warehouse. It looked quiet, too quiet. We managed to get in relatively quickly. I was still in pain, but it didn't show on my face. I felt myself still feeling weaker. We made it into a room with a stairs and Landon being tied to a chair. I surveyed the room and saw a headless fucking guy. I motioned first Hope to look up. So much for being a phoenix. Useless, I said under my breath. I sensed another presence in the room. His signature was eerily similar to our. Ran and untied Landon, taking his gag out as he started to explain stuff. I watched the headless guy get closer. All right, Gollum, we don't care if your father was an ant. What I do care about is where the other key is. He pointed to the other signature. I felt. Who's this, your Gollum brother? I questioned because they did look alike, like the hair, but he looked built bigger than the scrawny phoenix. Yeah, he's actually my brother, said the boy sadly. I sighed. And how do we kill the headless guy? I questioned to them. Landon went into some historical information about the headless guy, who was apparently called a Dullahan, and the only way to kill him was stabbing him in his face, literally. Okay, Hope, you deal with Gollum's brother while I take care of the Dullahan. She nodded. I headed off to fight this creature. The fight was too slow to my liking. Besides, he kept swinging his darn chain at me, so I couldn't get too close. I created a clone behind him and threw my kunai toward the clone and watched as the clone stabbed him in the head. He crumbled down to the floor while Landon just watched from the sideline. I heard Hope scream, "No!" Turning around, I saw the knife fall into the pit of mud as it bubbled. Hope magically snapped the guy's head and turned to me. "It's too late." I sighed and walked over to her, still struggling a bit. "It's all right, we'll fight this Malivore guy together." I kissed her lips softly. "It's not too late and it's not over." Hope stared at me. I could tell she was processing my words, but there was something else in her eyes. "I can do something," she said firmly. "What do you mean, Hope?" I asked. She smiled, but it wasn't a smile I'd ever seen on her face. She grabbed my cheeks and kissed me hard. "I love you." Before I could say anything, I heard her mutter a spell. Ad somnum. I fought against it, but being a bit weaker because of those bullets, I fell asleep. I woke up groggily and saw Landon on the ground, his neck snapped. Hope on the phone. She looked to me. "I didn't expect you to be awake so quickly." I tried to move, but I felt my arms chained. My gaze traveled up to see it was chained into the wall. "What is this, Hope?" I said, pulling on the chains, but the pain in chest made it more difficult. "I didn't want you to stop me," she said, looking down at the ground. "Stop what, Hope?" I was getting even more frustrated by her vague answers. "I'm going to stop Malivore by jumping in there," she said, finally looking in my eyes. My mouth dropped open. "No. No, you are not doing that. Please, we can find another way." "There is no other way. Malivore was created by a witch, vampire and wolf," she said, chuckling dryly. "I am the loophole, Naruto, don't you see?" I shook my head, refusing to let her do something so stupid. "I always wondered whether I was a miracle or a mistake," she said, trying to convince me, or maybe herself. I didn't know, but what I did know was that she was never a mistake. "That's simple. You were always a miracle, never a mistake, Hope," I said sincerely, pulling on the chains. Laughed and came to me, kissing me. "I love you so much, baby, but I have to do this," she said, walking away. I tried pulling more. I felt it giving way. "Hope, if you do this, I'll hate you," I said, trying to convince myself. My eyes were filling with tears as I watched her smile sadly. "You could never, but you won't remember me anyway." She walked to the guy who just woke up and casted some kind of spell. I watched her stepping closer to the edge of the pit. "Hope!" I screamed as jumped into the pit. My tears were streaming down my face as I felt my eyes burning even more, but I didn't care about any of that. I needed to get to her before she jumped. I gathered all my strength, breaking the chains. I ripped the wall and heard it crumble. I ran over to the pit, but it sealed up. My fists were raw as I pounded the ground, screaming her name. At that time, I didn't even realize that I could still remember her, that she wasn't erased from my memory. "Hope, please come back." My beast roared as I felt myself being dragged into my mindscape. I opened my eyes to the voice. It was Kurama in his human form. "I see you've unlocked it, Kit." I stared confusedly as he pointed down to the water beneath me. I looked down and saw my eyes purple with rings around it. I whispered in wonder, "The Rinnegan."